She disappeared carrying the future heir to the throne, and no one, not even she, knew it yet. One night at the Harvest Moon Festival. One impossible choice. One consequence that would shake an entire kingdom. Patricia Knox never imagined that a single evening with a stranger would bind her fate to the most powerful alpha in the realm. Now Christopher Choi has mobilized his entire army, tracking her scent across 5 territories, while she hides in a remote village, protecting a secret growing inside her. A secret she doesn't fully understand. A secret that pulses with power every time she thinks of golden eyes in the darkness. The Alpha King is coming. And this time, she can't run. If you want to see Patricia survive what's coming, if you want to watch the Alpha King finally find his mate, if you want to witness the moment this tiny, powerful child enters a world that's not ready for her, hit that like button right now. Because this story, it's about to get wild. Chapter 1 starts in 3, 2, 1. Chapter 1, The Desperate Encounter. Patricia Knox stood at the edge of the Harvest Moon Festival, her stomach tight with hunger and her fingers clutching the last copper coin she owned. The festival sprawled across the neutral grounds between territories, a riot of color and sound and light that made her eyes ache after weeks of darkness. Lanterns hung from every tree, their warm glow painting the crowd in shades of amber and gold. Music drifted through the air, punctuated by laughter and the sharp crack of celebration fireworks. She didn't belong here. Everyone around her wore fine clothes, silk and velvet that caught the lantern light. They moved with the easy confidence of people who had never worried about their next meal, never slept in abandoned barns, never run until their feet bled just to stay ahead of the men hunting them. Patricia pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders and tried to make herself invisible. She had snuck past the festival guards an hour ago, slipping through a gap in the wooden fence when their attention was elsewhere. She wasn't here for celebration. She was here because the festival meant food, and food meant survival for one more day. The scent of roasted meat and fresh bread made her mouth water. Long tables lined the central square, laden with more food than she had seen in months. Whole roasted pigs, platters of fruit, towers of pastries dusted with sugar that sparkled like snow. Her hands trembled as she edged closer, scanning for an opportunity. Just one roll. Just enough to quiet the gnawing emptiness. "Careful," a voice murmured beside her. Patricia spun, heart hammering. An older woman stood there, her face weathered but kind, her eyes knowing. She wore a server's apron, stained with grease and flour. They watched the food tables, the woman continued quietly. "Especially tonight. Too many desperate souls think festival means free charity." "I wasn't," Patricia began, but the woman waved a hand. "Save your breath, child. I can see hunger when it's standing in front of me." She glanced around, then pressed something into Patricia's palm. A cloth bundle, warm and heavy. "Meat pie. Still hot. Go to the edges. Away from the lights. Eat quickly and leave before the Alpha King arrives." Patricia's fingers closed around the bundle, gratitude flooding through her. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just survive." The woman turned back to her work, already dismissing her. Patricia melted into the crowd, making her way toward the darker edges of the festival grounds, where the lantern light didn't quite reach. Her heart was still racing, but now from relief, rather than fear. She found a spot behind a row of merchant tents, hidden in shadow, and unwrapped the cloth with shaking hands. The pie was still warm, the crust golden and flaky. She bit into it and nearly sobbed at the taste. Real meat, seasoned with herbs she couldn't name. She forced herself to eat slowly, to make it last, even though every instinct screamed at her to devour it in 3 bites. She was halfway through when she felt it. A prickling sensation on the back of her neck. The weight of someone's attention, heavy and undeniable. Patricia went very still, the pie forgotten in her hands. Slowly, carefully, she turned her head. Golden eyes watched her from across the space between tents. The man stood in shadow like her, but even in darkness, he was impossible to miss. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that made the air around him feel charged. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and those eyes, gods, those eyes burned with an intensity that made her breath catch. He wore simple clothes, a dark shirt and trousers that suggested wealth in their quality but not their ostentation. No jewels, no obvious weapons, nothing to mark him as anyone important. But the way he held himself, the way he moved as he stepped closer, spoke of power that didn't need decoration. Patricia's instincts screamed at her to run, but her body wouldn't move. "You don't belong here," he said. His voice was deep, controlled, but there was something beneath it, something rough and hungry that had nothing to do with food. "Neither do you." The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Not dressed like that. Not hiding in the shadows. Something flickered in those golden eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or amusement. He moved closer, and Patricia's back hit the tent wall behind her. She wasn't trapped, she could run to the left or right, but something kept her frozen in place. Not fear, exactly. Something else. Something that made her skin feel too hot and her pulse pound in her throat. "I'm hiding from duty," he said quietly. "What are you hiding from?" "Everything." The truth slipped out unbidden. "Everyone." He studied her face in the darkness, and Patricia had the strangest sensation that he was seeing more than just her features. Seeing past the dirt and exhaustion and fear to something underneath. "You're alone," he said. Not a question. "I'm fine. You're starving." I said, "I'm fine." But her voice cracked on the words, betraying her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. The clink of coins was unmistakable as he held it out to her. "Take it." Patricia stared at the pouch. "Why?" "Because you need it. You don't know me." "No," he agreed. "But I know what it's like to be alone. To feel like the world is hunting you." His jaw tightened. "Take it, please." There was something in his voice, in the way he said please, that made Patricia's chest ache. She reached out slowly and took the pouch. It was heavier than she expected, far more coins than she'd dared hope for. "Thank you," she whispered. "What's your name?" She hesitated. Giving her name felt dangerous, felt like handing over a piece of herself she couldn't afford to lose. But those golden eyes were patient, waiting, and something in her wanted to give him this one small truth. "Patricia." "Patricia." He said it like he was tasting it, memorizing it. "I'm..." A shout cut through the night. "Your Majesty, the council is asking for you." Patricia's blood turned to ice. "Your Majesty." The man, the Alpha King, closed his eyes briefly, frustration flashing across his face. When he opened them again, he looked at Patricia with something that might have been regret. "I have to go." Patricia couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't process what she'd just heard. "Yes." He stepped back, but his eyes never left hers. "Will you be here? After?" "I want to." "No." Patricia was already moving, already running. "I can't. I'm sorry." "Wait." But she didn't wait. She ran into the darkness between tents, her heart hammering, the coin pouch clutched against her chest. Behind her, she heard him call out, heard the frustration in his voice, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. The Alpha King. She'd just taken charity from the Alpha King, and worse, far worse, was the way her body still burned from his proximity. The way those golden eyes had looked at her like she mattered, like she was something precious instead of something broken. Patricia ran until the festival lights were distant stars behind her, until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out. Only then did she stop, gasping for breath in the darkness of the forest road. She should keep running. Should put as many miles between herself and that festival as possible. But something made her look back. And in the distance, barely visible, she saw a figure standing at the edge of the festival grounds. Tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to glow even from this distance. Watching. Waiting. Patricia turned away and kept walking into the darkness. She told herself she would never see him again. Told herself it was better this way. Told herself that the ache in her chest was just exhaustion, just hunger, just the weight of another day survived. She told herself many things that night. All of them were lies. 3 hours later, Patricia found an abandoned shepherd's cottage at the edge of someone's property. The roof was half caved in, and the door hung crooked on its hinges, but it was shelter. She slipped inside, found a corner that looked relatively dry, and finally let herself collapse. The coin pouch felt heavy in her pocket. She pulled it out and opened it carefully, counting by moonlight filtering through the broken roof. 20 silver coins. Enough to buy food for weeks. Enough to rent a room in a village. Enough to stop running, at least for a little while. Patricia closed her eyes and saw golden eyes in the darkness. Felt again the way her skin had burned when he'd stepped close. Remembered the roughness in his voice when he'd said please. Stupid, she whispered to herself. Stupid, stupid, stupid. The Alpha King wasn't looking for a nameless wanderer. Whatever she'd felt was just her own loneliness, her own desperate need to feel safe even for a moment. By tomorrow he would have forgotten her completely. Patricia curled up in the corner, using her shawl as a blanket, and tried to sleep. She didn't know that miles away, Christopher Choi stood in his private chambers, staring out at the dark forest, his hands clenched into fists. She didn't know that her scent had burned itself into his memory, wild herbs and wood smoke and something indefinable that made his wolf snarl with recognition. She didn't know that he'd already given orders to his most trusted scout. Find her. I don't care how long it takes. And she certainly didn't know that in 6 weeks, she would wake up sick and terrified, with a healer's gentle hand on her shoulder and words that would change everything. Child, you're with child. But tonight, in the abandoned cottage, Patricia simply closed her eyes and tried to forget golden eyes that saw too much. Chapter 2. The Secret She Carries. 6 weeks later, Patricia woke to the now familiar lurch of her stomach and barely made it outside before she was sick. Again, for the 4th morning in a row. She braced herself against the wall of the small room she'd rented in the village of Millbrook, her body trembling as the nausea slowly subsided. The morning air was cool against her clammy skin, and she took deep breaths, trying to steady herself. This wasn't normal. She knew that much. At first, she'd thought it was bad food. The meat pie from a questionable tavern, perhaps, or water from a contaminated well. But 4 days of waking up sick, of being unable to keep down breakfast, of feeling exhausted no matter how much she slept, this was something else. Something that made her hands shake with a fear that had nothing to do with the men who'd been hunting her. Patricia stumbled back inside and splashed water from the basin on her face. In the cracked mirror above the washing stand, her reflection looked pale and drawn. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her cheekbones seemed sharper than they'd been a month ago. The coin pouch from the Alpha King had bought her this room, had bought her food and relative safety for 6 weeks. She'd been careful with the money, stretching it as far as possible, but it was running low now. She'd need to find work soon. If she could stop being sick long enough to work. A knock at the door made her freeze. Patricia? The landlady's voice was muffled through the wood. Child, are you well? I heard you outside again. Patricia pressed her hand to her mouth, then forced herself to speak. I'm fine, Mrs. Harmon. Just a stomach ailment. It'll pass. Silence. Then, I'm sending for Kelly. Don't argue. Patricia's stomach dropped. That's not necessary. You've been sick 4 mornings running. That's not a stomach ailment, girl. That's something that needs a healer's attention. The landlady's footsteps retreated down the hall before Patricia could protest further. Patricia sank onto the narrow bed, her heart racing. A healer. Gods. She couldn't afford a healer. The coins in her pouch were meant for next week's rent, for food, for survival. But even as panic clawed at her throat, another feeling twisted beneath it. A suspicion she'd been trying desperately to ignore for the past week. No, it couldn't be. One night. One impossible night with a stranger who'd turned out to be a king. Her hand moved to her stomach without conscious thought, pressing against the flat plane through her thin dress. It couldn't be. Kelly Woods arrived an hour later, carrying a worn leather bag that smelled of herbs and medicine. She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and capable hands, her brown hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a practical bun. Mrs. Harmon says you've been ill, Kelly said without preamble, setting her bag on the small table. How long? 4 days. Maybe 5. Patricia stayed on the bed, her arms wrapped around herself. It's just a stomach problem. I probably ate something. Only in the mornings? Kelly interrupted, pulling out various bottles and pouches. And you're tired all the time? More than usual? Patricia hesitated. Yes. When was your last monthly bleeding? The question hung in the air like a blade. Patricia's throat went dry. I don't think, child. Kelly's voice was gentle but firm. When? Patricia tried to count back, but the past 2 months had been a blur of running and hiding and trying to survive. She'd been so focused on staying ahead of her pursuers that she hadn't paid attention to. Oh gods. 7 weeks. Maybe 8. I don't remember exactly, Patricia whispered. But it's been a while. Kelly nodded, her expression knowing. She crossed to the bed and sat beside Patricia, her movements slow and non-threatening. I need to examine you. Just your belly and pulse. Is that all right? Patricia wanted to say no, wanted to refuse, to keep living in the uncertain space where she didn't know for sure. But the healer was already here. And Mrs. Harmon would ask questions if Patricia sent her away. All right. Kelly's hands were warm and gentle as she pressed them to Patricia's stomach, feeling carefully. Then she took Patricia's wrist, fingers finding her pulse. Her eyes closed, and Patricia recognized the signs of someone with a gift for healing, someone who could sense more than just physical symptoms. After a long moment, Kelly's eyes opened. She looked at Patricia with a mixture of sympathy and concern. Child, she said softly. You're with child. The words seemed to come from very far away. Patricia heard them, understood them, but couldn't quite make them feel real. That's not possible, she heard herself say. It was only once. Only one night. Once is all it takes. Kelly squeezed her hand. About 6 or 7 weeks along, I'd guess. Still very early. But the signs are clear. The morning sickness, the exhaustion, the missed bleeding. And I can feel the life inside you. Faint. But there. Patricia's vision blurred. She realized distantly that she was crying, tears sliding down her cheeks without sound. I can't, she whispered. I can't be pregnant. I have nothing. I'm running from. She caught herself. I can't take care of a baby. You have time to figure things out, Kelly said. But Patricia, I need to tell you something else. She paused, her expression troubled. This child. It has power. Strong power. I can feel it already, and that shouldn't be possible this early. The father, who was he? Patricia's mind flashed to golden eyes in the darkness, to a voice that had made her feel safe for the first time in months, to hands that could have taken but had only given. I don't know, she lied. Just someone at the festival. Kelly studied her face, clearly not believing the lie, but she didn't push. Well, whoever he was, he had alpha blood. Strong alpha blood. This child is going to be powerful, Patricia. Which means carrying it won't be easy. And raising it will be even harder. How much harder? The pregnancy might be more difficult than normal. More exhausting, more draining. And when the child is born, Kelly shook her head. A child with this much power will draw attention. People will sense it. Some will want to protect it. Others will want to use it. Patricia felt ice spread through her veins. What are you saying? I'm saying you need to be careful. Very careful. Kelly stood and began packing her bag. I'll leave you some herbs for the morning sickness. Ginger root and mint. Steeped in hot water. Drink it first thing when you wake. It should help. She pulled out several small pouches and set them on the table. Then she turned back to Patricia, her expression serious. And Patricia, if you're running from something, you need to think about whether you can keep running. Not just for yourself anymore. After the healer left, Patricia sat on the bed for a long time, her hand pressed to her stomach. The room felt too small, the walls pressing in. Pregnant. She was pregnant with the Alpha King's child. A child she couldn't keep. A child she couldn't raise. A child that would draw attention and danger and would bind her forever to a man she'd met for less than an hour. She should feel trapped. Should feel desperate. But underneath the fear, underneath the panic, there was something else. Something small and fierce and undeniable. A fierce protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. I won't let anything hurt you, she whispered to her still flat stomach. I don't know how, but I'll keep you safe. 2 days later, Patricia stood at the market square, using the last of her coins to buy supplies. She'd managed to keep down the ginger tea Kelly had left, and while the morning sickness hadn't disappeared, it was manageable now. She was examining a loaf of bread when she heard the whispers. They say the Alpha King is still searching. Patricia's blood went cold. Her hand froze over the bread as she strained to hear more. Two women stood a few stalls away, their voices low but carrying in the morning air. Searching for what? The younger one asked. Not what. Who? The older woman leaned closer. They say he met someone at the Harvest Moon Festival. A woman. And she disappeared before he could get her name. Surely not. The Alpha King has hundreds of women at his disposal. Why would he search for? Because she's his mate. The older woman's voice dropped to a whisper. That's what the servants are saying. That he recognized her. That his wolf knows. Patricia's knees went weak. She gripped the market stall to steady herself. That's impossible, the younger woman said. If she was his mate, she'd know too. She'd have felt it. She wouldn't have run. Unless she didn't know what she was feeling. Unless she was just a common girl who panicked. The younger woman laughed. Then she's a fool. Being mate to the Alpha King? That's every woman's dream, or nightmare, depending on who you are. Patricia forced herself to move, to walk away from the whispering women before they noticed her eavesdropping. Her mind raced as she made her way back to the boarding house. Mate. They'd said mate. She'd heard the word before in passing, in stories told by travelers. Soul bonds, they called them. Rare connections between wolves where two people recognized each other at a fundamental level. Destiny, fate, whatever name you gave it. But Patricia wasn't a wolf. She was human, common, nobody. Except now she was carrying a child with alpha blood. A child that apparently had enough power that a healer could sense it at 6 weeks. Back in her room, Patricia pulled out the items she'd carefully hidden under her mattress. The clothes she'd arrived in, the thin shawl, and the one thing she hadn't been able to leave behind, a handkerchief she'd found in her pocket the morning after the festival. She hadn't put it there, which meant he had. Patricia unfolded it carefully. The fabric was fine, expensive, embroidered with a design she now recognized as the royal crest. And in one corner, so small she'd almost missed it, were initials in golden thread. C. Christopher Choi. She pressed the handkerchief to her face and caught the faintest trace of his scent. Cedar and smoke, and something wild that made her wolf wait. She didn't have a wolf. She was human, wasn't she? Patricia lowered the handkerchief, her heart pounding. In the mirror across the room, her reflection looked the same as always. Brown hair, dark eyes, nothing special. But as she watched, as she thought about golden eyes and impossible connections, her eyes flickered. Just for a second. Just long enough to show a hint of amber that shouldn't exist. Patricia dropped the handkerchief and stumbled back. No, she whispered. No, that's not possible. But the evidence was right there. In her reflection. In the child growing inside her. In the way she'd felt when he'd looked at her like coming home after a lifetime of being lost. She was his mate. And she'd run. And now he was searching for her with his entire army, while she carried his child, while enemies she didn't even know about circled closer. Patricia sank to the floor, her hand pressed to her stomach, and finally let herself admit the truth. She couldn't keep running. Not anymore. Not like this. But she also couldn't go back, because the moment the Alpha King found out about the baby, about what she was, about the bond between them, he would never let her go. She would become a possession, a vessel for his heir, locked away and protected and controlled. She'd escaped one cage already. She wouldn't willingly walk into another. I'm sorry, she whispered, pressing the handkerchief to her stomach. I'm so sorry, but I have to keep us both safe. And that means staying hidden. The decision settled over her like a weight. She would leave Millbrook tonight, would travel to the borderlands, to the remote villages where the Alpha King's reach didn't extend. She would hide her scent, disguise her appearance, bury the handkerchief and any evidence of their connection, and she would raise their child alone. Patricia stood, already planning her escape. She had maybe 6 hours before dark. Time to pack. to say goodbye to Mrs. Harmon, to disappear like she'd done so many times before. But this time felt different. This time she wasn't just running from her past, she was running from her future. Chapter 3. Hunted from all sides. 3 months later, Patricia pressed her hand against the small swell of her belly and tried to catch her breath. The morning sickness had finally eased around week 12, but now exhaustion plagued her constantly. Every step felt like wading through water, and her body ached in ways she'd never experienced. She stood in the back room of a small apothecary in the village of Thornwick, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. The work was simple enough. Crush the dried leaves, measure them into portions, wrap them in cloth packets. The apothecary, an elderly woman named Vivian Howe, had taken pity on her when she'd arrived 2 months ago, heavily pregnant and desperate for work. Well, not heavily pregnant then, but growing more obvious by the day. Patricia wore loose dresses now, layers that helped hide the curve of her stomach. At 3.5 months, she could still pass for simply having gained weight, but she knew that window was closing fast. Soon there would be no hiding what she carried. "Patricia?" Vivian's voice called from the front of the shop. "Can you bring the lavender packets? I have a customer coming." Patricia wiped her hands on her apron and gathered the finished packets, carrying them to the front room. The customer was a middle-aged man in traveling clothes, his boots dusty from the road. He barely glanced at Patricia as she set the packets on the counter, his attention focused on Vivian. "I'll take 6, he said, counting out coins. "My wife swears by lavender for headaches." "Wise woman," Vivian said, wrapping the packets in brown paper. "Will you be staying in Thornwick long?" "Just passing through. Though I heard some interesting news at the tavern." The man leaned closer, lowering his voice. "They say the Alpha King's men were in Millbrook last week asking questions." Patricia's hands stilled on the herb she'd been sorting. "Still searching for that mysterious woman?" Vivian asked, her tone casually interested. "Apparently, though the trail's gone cold, from what I hear. She vanished completely after leaving Millbrook." The man shook his head. 3 months of searching and nothing. His advisors are pushing him to give up, to choose a proper mate from the noble families. "And will he?" The man laughed. "Not likely. They say he's obsessed. Barely sleeps, barely eats. Just keeps sending out search parties, tracking down every rumor and lead." He pocketed his change. "Seems a waste to me. All this fuss over one woman, when he could have his pick of hundreds." After the customer left, Patricia stood frozen behind the counter, her heart hammering. Vivian turned to her with knowing eyes. "You're pale, child. Sit down before you fall down." Patricia sank onto the stool behind the counter, her legs suddenly weak. "He's still looking." "Of course he is." Vivian moved around the counter and placed a gentle hand on Patricia's shoulder. "Did you really think he'd stop?" Patricia had told Vivian part of the truth when she'd arrived, that she was running from the father of her child, that he was powerful and wouldn't let her go if he found her. Vivian had asked no questions, had simply offered work in a small room above the shop, but she'd always wondered how much the old woman had guessed. "I hoped he would forget," Patricia whispered. "That he'd move on. Men like that don't forget. Especially not when the bond pulls at them." Vivian squeezed her shoulder. "But Thornwick is far from his usual territories. And you've done well hiding your scent with the herbs I gave you. As long as you're careful, you should be safe here." Patricia wanted to believe that. Desperately wanted to believe that she could simply stay hidden in this small village, working in the apothecary, raising her child in quiet anonymity. But the child inside her seemed to have other ideas. As if responding to her thoughts, a wave of energy pulsed through her belly, warm and strong and undeniably powerful. Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. "What is it?" Vivian asked sharply. "The baby. Patricia couldn't find words for what she was feeling. It wasn't painful. Exactly. But it was intense, like lightning contained in her skin. It's never done this before." Vivian's expression grew serious. She moved her hand to Patricia's belly, her healer's gift, reaching out to sense what was happening. Her eyes widened. "Gods," she breathed. "The child is manifesting already. That shouldn't be possible. It's too early." "What does that mean?" It means the father's bloodline is even more powerful than I thought. Vivian pulled her hand back, looking troubled. Patricia, you need to understand something. A child this powerful will draw attention whether you want it to or not. As it grows stronger, as it gets closer to birth, others will sense it, especially those with gifts like mine. Fear curled cold in Patricia's stomach. What kind of others? Healers, seers, wolves with strong instincts? Vivian paused. And those who would use such power for their own purposes. Patricia felt the room tilt. She gripped the counter to steady herself. You're saying I'm not safe here. I'm saying you need to be even more careful than you've been. And Vivian hesitated. You should consider whether hiding is really the best choice for you and your child. You think I should go to him? It wasn't a question. I think a child this powerful needs protection that you can't provide alone. And I think the Alpha King would move heaven and earth to keep both of you safe if he knew. He'd lock me away. Patricia's voice came out flat, certain. I'd become nothing but a vessel for his heir, a possession to be guarded and controlled. Maybe, or maybe he'd surprise you. Vivian moved back around the counter. But it's your choice, child. I won't force you either way. Just be careful, be watchful, and trust your instincts. That night, Patricia lay in her small room above the shop, unable to sleep. The child moved inside her now, not kicks yet, but flutters and pulses of energy that she'd learned to recognize. She placed both hands on her stomach, feeling the warmth radiating through her skin. I don't know what to do, she whispered to the life growing inside her. I want to keep you safe, but I don't know how. I don't know if hiding is protecting you or putting you in more danger. Another pulse of energy answered her, and Patricia closed her eyes. In her dreams, she saw golden eyes watching her from across a dark space, heard a voice that made her chest ache with longing, felt hands gentle on her face, in her hair, tracing the curve of her jaw. Where are you? The voice asked. Please, I can feel you're in pain. Let me help. Patricia woke with tears on her cheeks and the phantom sensation of his touch still burning on her skin. The bond, she realized. It was getting stronger. As the child grew, as her body changed, the connection between them intensified. Soon she wouldn't be able to hide from it anymore. Soon he would find her whether she wanted him to or not. 2 weeks later, Patricia was sorting through a shipment of dried roots when Vivian rushed into the back room, her face pale. Hide, the old woman hissed. Now, Patricia's blood turned to ice. What? Soldiers. 3 of them. Wearing the Alpha King's colors. They're asking questions at the tavern across the street. Vivian grabbed her arm. The cellar. Go. Patricia didn't argue. She followed Vivian through the shop to a small door hidden behind a shelf. The cellar below was dark and damp, filled with storage barrels and boxes. Vivian pressed a vial into her hand. Rub this on your skin, all over. It'll mask your scent for a few hours. She squeezed Patricia's hand. Stay quiet. Don't come up until I tell you it's safe. The door closed, plunging Patricia into darkness. She uncorked the vial with shaking hands and rubbed the oily liquid on her neck, her wrists, anywhere she could reach. It smelled of sage and something bitter, strong enough to make her eyes water. Above her, she heard footsteps. Voices. The creak of the shop door opening, just asking if you've seen anyone matching this description. A male voice, deep and official. I see many people, Vivian replied calmly. Can you be more specific? Young woman, mid-20s, brown hair, dark eyes. Might be traveling alone. Might seem nervous. Hiding something. Patricia pressed her hand over her mouth, forcing her breathing to stay silent. That describes half the travelers who pass through, Vivian said. Do you have a name? If we had a name, we wouldn't be searching village by village for 3 months. Frustration edged the soldier's voice. The Alpha King is offering a substantial reward for information leading to her location. How substantial? Enough gold to buy this shop 3 times over. Silence. Patricia's heart hammered so hard she was sure they could hear it through the floorboards. I haven't seen anyone matching that description, Vivian said finally. But if I do, I'll send word. See that you do. The Alpha King is not patient about this matter. More footsteps. The door opening and closing. Patricia waited, counting her heartbeats, until Vivian's voice called down. They're gone. You can come up. Patricia climbed the stairs on shaking legs. Vivian locked the shop door and pulled the curtains closed before turning to her. They're getting closer, the old woman said. And the reward. She shook her head. 3 months ago, it was 50 gold. Now it's 300. Someone will talk eventually. Someone always does. I need to leave. Patricia's voice came out steady, despite the fear clawing at her throat. Tonight. Before someone recognizes me. Where will you go? Further into the borderlands. Somewhere even more remote. Patricia moved toward the stairs to pack her few belongings. Somewhere his soldiers won't think to look. Patricia. Vivian's voice stopped her. How long do you think you can keep running? You're 4 months pregnant now. Soon you'll be too far along to travel safely, and when the child comes... She trailed off meaningfully. I'll figure something out. Will you? Vivian moved closer. Or will you end up giving birth alone in some barn with no help, no protection? Is that really what's best for your child? Patricia felt tears burn her eyes. What choice do I have? You could send word to him. Anonymously. Let him know you're safe, that you need time. Give him something so he's not tearing the kingdom apart searching. He'd track it. He'd find me. Maybe. Or maybe he'd respect your need for space if you just communicated. Vivian sighed. I'm not saying you should go to him. I'm saying you should stop running blindly and start thinking strategically. You have a powerful child coming. That changes everything. Patricia wanted to argue. Wanted to insist she could keep running, keep hiding. But the exhaustion in her bones and the growing weight in her belly told a different story. She was running out of time. Out of options. Out of places to hide. And somewhere, miles away but getting closer every day, a man with golden eyes was hunting for her with the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. Patricia touched her stomach, feeling the strong pulse of life within. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. But the child inside her seemed to have its own opinion. Another wave of energy rolled through her, warm and insistent, and pulling towards someone far away. The bond was getting stronger. And soon, no amount of hiding would be enough. Christopher stood over a map spread across the table, marking another village searched, another dead end. His beta, Peter Gifford, watched from across the room with worried eyes. Your Majesty, the council is pressing for answers. They want to know how long this search will continue, until I find her. Christopher's voice was raw from lack of sleep, rough with frustration. It's been 3 months. The trail has gone cold. Maybe she doesn't want to be found. Christopher's head snapped up, his eyes flashing gold. She's my mate, Peter. She may not understand what that means, but I do. The bond is killing me slowly. Every day she's gone, I feel it more. The emptiness, the wrongness of being apart. He slammed his hand on the table. She's out there, somewhere, and I will find her. Peter opened his mouth to respond, then froze. His nostrils flared. Your Majesty, do you smell that? Christopher went still, every sense sharpening. There faint but unmistakable a trace of her scent on the wind coming through the open window. Wild herbs and wood smoke and something uniquely her. But underneath it, something new. Something that made his wolf surge to the surface with violent intensity. She's pregnant, he breathed. Gods, she's pregnant with my child. Peter's eyes widened. Are you certain? I can smell it. The change in her scent. Christopher couldn't finish. His hands were shaking, his entire body trembling with the force of the revelation. That's why she ran. That's why she's hiding. But if she's carrying your heir, then I need to find her now. Christopher was already moving toward the door. Not just for me, for our child. For he stopped, a new fear clawing at him. Peter, if I can sense the pregnancy from this distance, others will too. Others who would use a child with alpha blood for their own purposes. You think she's in danger? I think she's been in danger since the moment she ran, and I've been too focused on my own pain to realize it. Christopher's jaw set with determination. Mobilize the search parties. Double the reward. And send word to every spy, every informant we have. I want her found. Now. Yes, Your Majesty. As Peter hurried to carry out the orders, Christopher moved to the window and stared out at the darkening sky. Hold on, he thought, sending the words out on the bond he could feel pulling taut between them. Please. Just hold on. I'm coming. And in a small room above an apothecary shop, Patricia woke from a restless sleep with the phantom echo of his voice in her mind and tears streaming down her face. The hunt was intensifying, and she was running out of places to hide. Chapter 4. The Heir grows. 5 months pregnant. Patricia woke to the now familiar sensation of movement inside her belly. Not the subtle flutters from a month ago, but real kicks strong enough to take her breath away. She pressed her hand to the spot where a tiny foot or fist pushed against her skin and felt tears sting her eyes. The baby was active at night, as if it knew these quiet hours belonged to just the two of them. Easy, she whispered, rubbing gentle circles. I'm here. I'm awake. Another kick, this one accompanied by that warm pulse of energy she'd come to recognize. The baby's power was growing stronger every day, and with it came complications she hadn't anticipated. Patricia sat up carefully, her back aching, and lit the candle beside her bed. She'd left Thornwick 2 weeks ago, moving deeper into the borderlands to a village called Riverside. It was barely a village, really just a cluster of houses along a river, far from any major roads. The kind of place people came to disappear. She'd found work at a small inn, cleaning rooms and helping in the kitchen. The innkeeper, an older man named Carlton Hernandez, asked no questions and paid in cash. It was perfect, except Patricia could feel time running out. At 5 months, her belly was undeniably round. No amount of loose clothing could hide it anymore. People stared when she walked through the village, whispered behind their hands. A young woman, alone and pregnant, was always cause for speculation. Patricia moved to the window and looked out at the sleeping village. Somewhere out there, Christopher was still searching. She felt it through the bond that grew stronger with each passing day, his desperation, his determination, his need. And God's help her, she felt her own answering pull. The longing to stop running, to turn around and let herself be found. To fall into arms she remembered too well and let someone else carry the weight for a while. But fear kept her frozen. Fear of what would happen when he found out about the baby. Fear of losing herself in the life of Aluna, becoming nothing but a vessel for his heir. Fear that he wanted the bond, the child, but not her. A sharp kick jolted her from her thoughts. Patricia looked down at her belly and saw something that made her breath catch. A glow. Faint, but unmistakable, pulsing beneath her skin in time with the baby's movements. No, she breathed. Not yet. You're too early for this. But the glow intensified, warm light spreading across her stomach. Patricia grabbed her shawl and wrapped it tightly around herself, but she could still see the light bleeding through the fabric. This was what Vivian had warned her about. The baby's power manifesting, becoming visible. Soon everyone would sense it, not just healers and seers, but any wolf with strong instincts. Patricia pressed both hands to her belly, trying to calm the child. Please, she whispered. Please. You have to hide. We have to stay hidden just a little longer. The glow faded slowly, reluctantly, until her belly looked normal again. But Patricia knew it was only temporary. The baby was getting stronger, and her ability to contain that power was weakening. She had maybe a month, 6 weeks at most. Then hiding would become impossible. Christopher stood at the window, his hand pressed to his chest where the bond pulled tight. He'd barely slept in weeks, running on adrenaline and desperation. She's in pain, he said without turning around. Peter, who'd been reviewing reports at the desk, looked up. How do you know? I can feel it. Through the bond. Christopher's jaw clenched. Not injury pain. Something else. Exhaustion, maybe. Or fear. We're narrowing the search, Peter said. The latest reports suggest she's moving toward the eastern borderlands. Remote villages, places where strangers don't draw attention. Smart. Christopher finally turned from the window. She's protecting the child. Staying away from populated areas where word might spread. Your Majesty. Peter hesitated. What will you do when you find her? If she ran because she was afraid, forcing her to come back might. I won't force her. Christopher's voice came out rougher than intended. But I will make her understand. The bond, the child, what it all means. She thinks she's protecting herself by running, but she's putting herself in more danger. Danger from what? Christopher moved to his desk and pulled out a sealed letter. This arrived yesterday. From one of our spies in the Southern Territories. Peter took the letter and read, his expression darkening. Dominique Miller. She's making inquiries about a pregnant woman? Not just any pregnant woman. One carrying alpha blood. Christopher's hands clenched into fists. Dominique has been trying to undermine my rule for years. If she finds Patricia first, if she realizes that child is mine, he didn't need to finish. They both knew what would happen. Dominique would use Patricia and the baby as leverage, as weapons to force Christopher's hand. Or worse, she'd eliminate them both to clear her own path to power. We need to move faster, Peter said. I know, which is why I'm going myself. Peter's head snapped up. Your Majesty, the Council will never approve. I don't care what the Council approves. Christopher was already moving toward his chambers to pack. My mate is out there, pregnant and vulnerable, with enemies circling closer. I've wasted 3 months sitting in this castle while others search. No more. Then I'm coming with you. Christopher paused, then nodded. Thank you, old friend. As they prepared to leave, Christopher felt the bond pulse with sudden intensity. Not pain this time, but something else. A surge of power that made his wolf surge to the surface. The baby. He breathed. It's manifesting. What does that mean? It means time just ran out. Anyone with the gift will be able to sense it now. Christopher grabbed his travel cloak. We leave within the hour. And Peter? Tell the fastest riders to head toward the eastern borderlands. I want every village searched, every stranger questioned. They'll need a description. Tell them to look for a woman who glows. Christopher's voice was grim. Because that's what's going to happen. The child's power will become visible. She won't be able to hide anymore. Patricia woke the next morning to Carlton, knocking on her door. Patricia? There's someone here asking questions. You might want to stay in your room today. She was at the door in seconds, her heart hammering. What kind of questions? About strangers passing through, specifically young women traveling alone. Carlton's weathered face was worried. It's not the Alpha King's soldiers this time. Different colors, different questions, but they're searching for someone, and I don't like the feel of them. Patricia felt ice spread through her veins. How many? 4 that I've seen. Could be more. Carlton glanced down the hallway. Listen, I don't know what trouble you're running from, and I don't need to know. But these people, they don't feel right. If you need to leave, do it quietly, through the back. I'll tell them I haven't seen anyone matching whatever description they give. Thank you, Patricia whispered. After Carlton left, Patricia moved with practiced efficiency. She'd learned to pack quickly over the past months, to keep her belongings minimal and ready for sudden departure. Within 10 minutes, her bag was ready. She crept to the window and carefully peered out at the street below. 4 figures in dark cloaks moved through the village, stopping at each building. Even from this distance, Patricia could sense something off about them. Not the disciplined energy of the Alpha King soldiers, but something colder, calculating. One of them looked up suddenly, their head turning toward her window as if they'd sensed her attention. Patricia jerked back, her heart racing. Had they seen her? Sensed her? She didn't wait to find out. Grabbing her bag, she slipped out of her room and down the back stairs. The inn had a rear entrance that led to an alley, and from there she could reach the forest path without being seen from the main street. But as she stepped into the alley, a voice stopped her cold. Running again? Patricia spun. A woman stood at the alley's entrance, tall, elegant, with sharp features and calculating gray eyes. She wore expensive traveling clothes, and power radiated from her like heat. I don't know what you're talking about, Patricia said, keeping her voice steady. Don't you? The woman smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You've been running for months now. From the Alpha King, from your own fate. It's quite the trail you've left, once someone knows what to look for. Who are you? Dominique Miller. Perhaps you've heard of me? When Patricia shook her head, Dominique's smile widened. How refreshing. Most people in the kingdom know my name. I'm the Alpha of the Southern Territories, and I'm very interested in what you're carrying. Patricia's hand moved instinctively to her belly. I don't know what you mean. Please. I can sense the child's power from here. Alpha blood. Strong and pure. Dominique stepped closer. Christopher's child. Unless I'm very much mistaken, which makes you very valuable indeed. I'm not interested in being valuable to anyone. That's not really your choice anymore, is it? Dominique gestured, and two of her men appeared at the other end of the alley, blocking Patricia's escape. You're coming with me. We're going to have a long conversation about your child's future. No. Patricia backed against the wall, her mind racing. She had no weapons, no way to fight. Just her own body and the child inside it, and the bond. Without thinking, without planning, Patricia did something she'd been avoiding for months. She opened herself to the bond completely, dropped every wall she'd built, and sent out a wordless cry for help. Christopher, please, I need you. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Shock, relief, desperate joy, and then pure determination flooding back through the connection. Where are you? Riverside, Eastern Borderlands. There's a woman, Dominique. I know her. Hold on, I'm coming. The bond pulsed with promise, but Patricia knew he was too far away. Whatever happened next, she had to survive on her own. Dominique was watching her with interest. What did you just do? Nothing. You're lying. I felt. Dominique's eyes widened. The bond. You just contacted him through the mate bond. Clever. But he's 3 days away at least. You'll be long gone by then. You don't know that. I know he's been searching from the capital. 3 days hard riding, even with his best horses. Dominique nodded to her men. Take her. Carefully, we need both her and the child intact. The men moved forward, and Patricia felt panic claw at her throat. But as they reached for her, something unexpected happened. The baby inside her reacted. A wave of power exploded outward from Patricia's belly, knocking both men backward. They hit the alley walls with enough force to stun them, sliding to the ground. Patricia stared at her stomach in shock. The glow was back, brighter than before, pulsing with protective energy. Dominique's expression shifted from confidence to wariness. Interesting. The child is already defending its mother. That's not normal. Stay away from us, Patricia said, her voice shaking but determined. I'm afraid I can't do that. Dominique's hands began to glow with her own power. But I'll be more careful. I don't want to hurt the child, but I will if necessary. Patricia knew she couldn't win this fight, knew that Dominique was stronger, more experienced, more powerful. But she also knew she had to try, for the child, for herself, for the man racing toward her across miles of territory. As Dominique raised her hands to strike, Patricia closed her eyes and reached for something she'd never accessed before, the power in her own blood, the gift she'd never known she had. And somewhere inside her, something ancient and strong answered. Chapter 5. The Message and the Rescue. Light exploded from Patricia's body, not just from her belly, but from her hands, her skin, everywhere. It was blinding, pure white tinged with gold, and it filled the alley like a physical force. Dominique stumbled backward, her own power flickering and dying against the onslaught. What? But Patricia didn't hear the rest. The power flowing through her was too much, too overwhelming. She felt herself falling, her knees hitting the ground, and then everything went dark. When Patricia woke, she was moving. Her body swayed with the rhythm of a horse's gait, and she realized she was being carried, cradled against someone's chest. For one terrified moment, she thought Dominique had taken her after all. Then she caught the scent. Cedar and smoke, and something wild that made every cell in her body recognize him. Christopher. Her eyes flew open. He was looking down at her, his golden eyes blazing with emotion so intense it stole her breath. Relief, fear, anger, joy, all of it tangled together. You're awake, he said, his voice rough. Thank the gods, you're awake. How? Patricia's voice came out as a croak. How did you get here so fast? I was already riding east when you called through the bond. 2 days, not 3. His arms tightened around her. When I felt your power surge, when I sensed the danger, I've never ridden so hard in my life. Patricia became aware of other horses around them. Peter rode to Christopher's right, and at least a dozen guards flanked them on all sides. They were moving fast, eating up the road with desperate speed. The woman, Patricia said suddenly. Dominique, gone by the time we arrived. She's smart enough not to face me directly, especially with my full guard. Christopher's jaw clenched. But she knows now. She knows about you, about the baby. She'll come again. Patricia's hand moved to her belly. Relief flooding through her when she felt the baby's familiar movement. Is it, are we? The baby's fine. Strong heartbeat, active. Christopher's voice softened. You protected it. That power you manifested, Patricia. Do you have any idea what you did? I don't know what happened. I needed to protect my baby. And something inside me answered. Our baby. Christopher corrected gently. And what answered was your own gift. You have healer's blood, Patricia. Ancient and powerful. I could sense it the moment I touched you. Patricia stared at him. That's not possible. I'm nobody. You're not nobody. The intensity in his voice made her fall silent. You never were. And I'm going to spend however long it takes proving that to you. Patricia felt tears burn her eyes. She'd spent 5 months running, hiding, convinced he would see her as nothing but a vessel for his heir. But the way he looked at her now, the way he held her as if she were something precious. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I ran. I was afraid. I know. Christopher pressed his forehead to hers for just a moment. And we'll talk about it, all of it. But right now, I need to get you somewhere safe. Dominique isn't the only threat. Once word spreads that you're carrying my child, every enemy I have will come looking. Where are we going? Home. To the castle. He must have felt her stiffen because he added quickly. I'm not locking you away. I'm not trapping you. But you need healers, protection, resources. And our child needs. He stopped, his eyes widening. His hand moved to her belly. And Patricia realized the baby was kicking, harder than it ever had before. It knows, Christopher breathed. It knows I'm here. The baby kicked again, directly against his palm. And the expression on Christopher's face was something Patricia would remember forever. Wonder, awe, fierce protectiveness, and a love so overwhelming it seemed to radiate from him. Hello, he murmured to her belly. I'm your father, and I promise you, I will keep you and your mother safe. No matter what it takes. Another kick, and Christopher laughed, a sound of pure joy that transformed his entire face. Patricia felt something crack open in her chest. This was what she'd been running from. This connection, this vulnerability, this terrifying certainty that her life would never be her own again. But watching him talk to their child, seeing the gentleness in his hands and the promise in his eyes, she realized something else. Maybe giving up some control didn't mean losing herself. Maybe it meant finally finding something she'd never had, a family. They rode for 3 days straight, stopping only when absolutely necessary. Christopher wouldn't let Patricia ride her own horse, insisting she stay in his arms where he could feel every breath, every movement. At first she'd protested, but exhaustion won out, and she found herself leaning into his chest, letting him carry her weight. They talked in fragments between stops. Patricia told him about the pregnancy discovery, about the villages she'd hidden in, about Vivian and Kelly and the others who'd helped her. Christopher told her about the search, about the nights he'd lain awake feeling the bond pull at him, about the moment he'd realized she was pregnant. I was terrified, he admitted on the second night, as they camped in a protected clearing. Patricia sat by the fire, wrapped in his cloak, while he kept watch. Not just that I couldn't find you, but that something would happen to you. That you'd be alone and in danger and I wouldn't be there. I was terrified too, Patricia said quietly. Of being found. Of what would happen if you knew about the baby. What did you think I would do? Patricia stared into the flames. Lock me away. Use me to get your heir and then discard me. I've heard the stories about how noble families treat women, how mates are valued for bloodlines, not for themselves. Christopher was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tight with controlled emotion. Is that really what you think of me? I didn't know you. One night at a festival, that's all we had. Patricia looked up at him. How was I supposed to know what kind of man you were? And now? Patricia thought about the past 3 days. How he'd held her gently even when she tried to pull away. How he'd stopped whenever she was uncomfortable, had made sure she ate and drank and rested. How he'd talked to their baby with such tenderness it made her chest ache. Now I'm starting to see, she said softly. Christopher moved closer, kneeling beside her. Patricia, I need you to understand something. The bond between us, it's not just about the child. It was there before you got pregnant. I felt it the moment I saw you at the festival. I felt something too, Patricia admitted. I didn't know what it was. It's called a mate bond. In our world, it's rare and precious. It means our souls recognize each other at a fundamental level. He took her hand carefully. You could be carrying 10 of my children or none, and I would still feel this pull toward you. The baby makes it more urgent, yes. But it's not the reason I want you. Patricia's throat tightened. Then what is? You. Christopher's thumb traced circles on her palm. Your strength. Your determination to protect what matters. The way you survived alone for 5 months when most people would have given up. He paused. The way you looked at me in that alley at the festival, like you saw past the crown to the man underneath. I didn't know about the crown then. Exactly. He smiled slightly. You saw me. Just me. Do you know how rare that is? Patricia didn't know what to say. She'd spent so long thinking of herself as nothing, as worthless, that having someone, especially someone like him, value her felt impossible to process. I know you're scared, Christopher continued. I know you don't trust this yet, but I'm asking you to give me a chance. Give us a chance. Let me prove that being my Luna doesn't mean losing yourself. It means finding everything you were always meant to be. And if I can't? If I'm not? Patricia gestured helplessly. I don't know how to be a Luna. I can barely read. I've never been to court. I don't know the first thing about ruling or politics or... You'll learn. And I'll teach you. Christopher squeezed her hand. But Patricia, you already have the most important quality. You put others before yourself. You protect the vulnerable. You do what's right even when it's hard. That's what makes a good Luna. The rest is just training. The baby kicked suddenly, hard enough to make Patricia gasp. Christopher's hand moved to her belly instantly, and they both felt the strong pulse of life beneath her skin. It always does that when you're near, Patricia murmured. Gets more active. Like it knows. Of course it knows. I'm its father. Christopher's voice was full of wonder. And you're its mother. The two most important people in its world. Patricia placed her hand over his, and for the first time since she'd discovered the pregnancy, she let herself feel something other than fear. Hope. They reached the castle at dawn on the 4th day. Patricia had seen it from a distance months ago when she'd worked there briefly under a false name, but she'd never passed through the main gates. Now, sitting in front of Christopher on his horse, she watched the massive structure grow larger with each step. Black stone towers rose against the lightening sky. Guards lined the walls, and as they approached, she heard horns blowing, announcing the Alpha King's return. It's so big, she whispered. It's home, Christopher said. You're home now, if you'll have it. The gates swung open, and they rode into a courtyard filled with people. Servants, guards, nobles, all assembled to witness the Alpha King's return. And the woman he'd brought back with him. Patricia felt their stares, heard the whispers start immediately. She wanted to hide, to make herself small and invisible like she'd done her whole life. But Christopher's arm tightened around her waist, steadying her. Head up, he murmured in her ear. You're carrying the future heir. That makes you untouchable. He dismounted first, then lifted her down with careful hands. Patricia's legs were unsteady after 4 days of riding, and she swayed slightly. Christopher caught her immediately, his hands on her waist. "I've got you," he said quietly. Then, louder, addressing the assembled crowd. "This is Patricia Knox, my mate. She carries my child, your future ruler. She will be treated with the respect and protection due to a Luna of this kingdom. Anyone who fails to do so will answer to me personally." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, people began to bow. First the guards, then the servants, then the nobles, all acknowledging her presence. Patricia felt overwhelmed, dizzy with the sudden shift from hunted fugitive to honored Luna. It didn't feel real. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, elderly, dignified, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. "Your Majesty, welcome home, and welcome to you, my dear," she said, turning to Patricia. "I'm Anne Suarez, head of the household staff. If you need anything at all, you have only to ask." "Thank you," Patricia managed. "Anne, see that chambers are prepared for Patricia," Christopher said, "and send for the castle healers immediately. I want her and the baby examined." "Of course, Your Majesty." Anne gestured to several servants, who hurried off to carry out the orders. Christopher guided Patricia toward the castle entrance, his hand on her lower back. Peter followed at a discreet distance, along with several guards. "There's so much to explain," Christopher said as they walked. "The layout of the castle, the staff, the protocols. But first you need rest, real rest, in a real bed." "Christopher," Patricia said suddenly, stopping. "The council. You said they've been pressuring you. What happens when they find out about me? About the baby?" His jaw tightened. "Let me worry about the council. But, Patricia," he turned to face her fully, "I am the Alpha King. My word is law. Yes, the council advises me, but they don't control me. And they certainly don't control who I choose as my mate." His eyes blazed. "I've spent 5 months searching for you. Now that I have you back, nothing, not the council, not tradition, not politics, is going to take you away from me again." The fierceness in his voice sent shivers down Patricia's spine. Not from fear, but from something else entirely. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? I'll try. I'll try to trust this. To trust you." Patricia placed her hand on her belly. "For the baby. If nothing else." Something flickered in Christopher's eyes, hurt. Maybe. That she couldn't yet say it was for herself too. But he nodded. "That's enough. For now, that's enough." As they entered the castle, Patricia caught a glimpse of faces in the shadows. Not everyone looked welcoming. Some expressions were calculating, others hostile, and one face in particular. A woman with cold eyes and a cruel smile watched Patricia with undisguised hatred. Patricia shivered, and Christopher noticed immediately. "What is it?" "Nothing. Just, I'm not sure everyone is happy I'm here. They'll learn to accept it." Christopher's arm wrapped around her shoulders. "And anyone who can't will leave. You and our child come first. Always." Patricia leaned into him, drawing strength from his certainty even as doubt gnawed at her. She was here now. Safe, protected, acknowledged. But the real battle winning over a court that saw her as an interloper, proving she could be the Luna they needed, protecting her child from enemies both outside and within these walls, was just beginning. Chapter 6: The Revelation and First Stand. The chambers Anne had prepared were more luxurious than anything Patricia had ever seen. A massive bed dominated the room, piled with soft blankets and pillows. Thick curtains framed windows that overlooked the castle gardens. A private bathing room adjoined the main chamber, complete with a copper tub large enough for 2 people. Patricia stood in the center of it all, feeling completely out of place. "The healers will be here within the hour," Christopher said from the doorway. He hadn't left her side since they'd arrived. "Are you hungry? I can have food sent up." "I'm fine." Patricia touched the edge of the bed, barely believing the softness. It's too much. It's barely enough." Christopher moved closer. "Patricia, you're carrying my child. You should have silk sheets, servants at your beck and call. Anything you could possibly want. I don't need silk sheets. I need..." Patricia stopped, not sure how to articulate what she actually needed. "Safety, yes." but also autonomy, purpose, a sense that she still had some control over her own life. A knock at the door interrupted them. Anne entered with two other women, one young and one middle-aged, both carrying baskets of supplies. "The healers, Your Majesty," Anne announced. The older woman stepped forward and bowed. "I'm Luella Ximenez, head healer. This is my apprentice, Deanna Avila. With your permission, we'd like to examine Patricia and the baby." Christopher looked at Patricia. "Is that all right?" Patricia nodded, grateful he'd asked instead of just assuming. "I'll wait outside," Christopher said, but Patricia caught his hand. "Stay, please." She wasn't sure why she wanted him there, only that the thought of being alone with strangers, even healers, made her anxious. His expression softened. "Of course." Luella directed Patricia to sit on the bed while she and Deanna unpacked their supplies. Christopher stood near the window, giving them space but staying close enough that Patricia could see him. "How far along are you?" Luella asked, her hands beginning to glow with a soft blue light as she reached toward Patricia's belly. "About 5.5 months, I think, maybe closer to 6. Luella's hands hovered over Patricia's stomach, not quite touching. Her eyes closed in concentration. After a moment, they snapped open, and she looked at Deanna. "Call for Kelly Woods, immediately." Patricia's heart lurched. "What's wrong?" "Is the baby?" "The baby is fine," Luella said quickly. "Very strong, actually. But I need a more experienced healer to confirm what I'm sensing." She looked at Christopher. "Your Majesty, I believe you should hear this as well." Christopher was at Patricia's side instantly. "What is it?" "I'd rather wait for confirmation before I say." "But..." Luella hesitated. "Have either of you experienced anything unusual? Dreams, visions, moments where you felt connected to each other despite the distance?" Patricia and Christopher exchanged glances. "Yes," Patricia said. "I've been dreaming about him, and sometimes I could feel his emotions, even when we were hundreds of miles apart." "That's the mate bond strengthening," Luella said. "But there's something else, something in Patricia's bloodline." She looked at Patricia with new interest. "Tell me about your parents, your family history." "I don't know anything about them. I was left at an orphanage as a baby. No name, no information, nothing at all. Just..." Patricia reached for the small bag she'd carried with her throughout her journey. Inside was the handkerchief Christopher had slipped into her pocket that first night, and beneath it, another cloth one she'd had since childhood. She pulled it out. "This. It was wrapped around me when I was left at the orphanage. The caretakers kept it for me." Luella took the cloth carefully. It was old, faded, but still bore traces of embroidery along the edges, symbols Patricia had never understood. The healer's breath caught. "Do you know what these are?" "No, they're protection runes. Ancient ones, used by the first healers." Luella looked up, her expression grave. "Patricia, you're not just someone with healer's blood. You're descended from the original healing bloodline, the one that predates the kingdoms themselves." The room fell silent. Christopher's hand found Patricia's, gripping tight. "What does that mean?" Patricia whispered. "It means your gift isn't just strong, it's primordial. The kind of power that was thought to have died out centuries ago." Luella set the cloth down carefully. "It explains why the baby is so powerful. Alpha blood combined with first healer blood. That hasn't happened in recorded history. But I can't control it," Patricia said. "I don't even know how I manifested that power in the alley. It just happened. Because you've never been trained. Your gift has been dormant your whole life, only activating when absolutely necessary, like when protecting your child." Luella stood. "With proper training, you could be one of the most powerful healers in the realm." Before Patricia could respond, the door burst open. Kelly Woods rushed in, slightly out of breath. "You called for me?" She stopped when she saw Patricia. Oh, I see." She moved quickly to the bed, her own hands beginning to glow. "May I? In the muxt? May I?" Patricia nodded, and Kelly placed her hands on Patricia's belly. Her eyes widened almost immediately. "First healer blood," she confirmed. "Stronger than I've seen in 50 years of practice." She looked at Patricia with something like awe. "Child, You're a miracle. And so is this baby. The baby, Christopher said, his voice tight. Is it healthy? The pregnancy is everything as it should be. Both healers smiled. The baby is perfectly healthy, Luella said. Strong heartbeat, good size for the gestational age, active and responsive. And the mother, despite 5 months of stress and running, is remarkably well. That's the healer's blood, Kelly added. Her body instinctively protects itself and the child. She's probably been healing minor injuries and ailments without even realizing it. Patricia felt tears sting her eyes. For 5 months, she'd been terrified something would go wrong, that the stress and fear would hurt the baby. Hearing that everything was fine, that her child was healthy and strong. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. There is one thing, Luella said, her expression growing serious. The baby's power is growing rapidly. Within the next month, maybe sooner, it will become visible to anyone with even basic sensitivity. You won't be able to hide it. I'm not hiding anymore, Patricia said firmly. She looked at Christopher. I'm here. Everyone knows about the baby. What's the point of hiding? Because not everyone wishes you well, a new voice said from the doorway. Patricia looked up to see an older woman entering the room, regal, imposing, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She wore rich fabrics and jewelry that spoke of high rank. Christopher's expression hardened. Counselor Susan Arellano, I don't recall inviting you to these chambers. No, but when I heard you'd returned with your supposed mate, I felt it necessary to assess the situation. Susan's gaze swept over Patricia, cold and evaluating. So this is the woman who's caused such chaos. A commoner. An orphan. Carrying what you claim is your heir. Watch your tone, Christopher said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. You're addressing your future, Luna. Am I? Susan moved closer. Because the council has questions. Many questions. About where she came from. About the timing of this pregnancy. About why she ran in the first place if this bond is so sacred. Patricia felt her face heat, but she forced herself to meet Susan's gaze. I ran because I was afraid. I had nothing, no one, and I was pregnant with a child I didn't know how to protect. How convenient. And now here you are, in the castle, positioned to become the most powerful woman in the kingdom. Susan's smile was razor sharp. Forgive me if I find the timing suspicious. Enough. Christopher stepped between them. Susan, you will treat Patricia with respect or you will leave this castle, permanently. The council won't stand for. The council serves at my pleasure, not the other way around. Christopher's eyes flashed gold. And if they have concerns about my mate, they can bring them to me directly, not ambush a pregnant woman in her chambers. Susan's jaw tightened, but she bowed stiffly. As you wish, Your Majesty. But this conversation isn't over. The council will demand answers. After she left, Patricia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Christopher turned to her immediately. I'm sorry. I should have posted guards. Should have kept her away from. It's fine. Patricia stood, her hand on her belly where the baby kicked in agitation. She's right to question me. I would too, in her position. She has no right to make you feel unwelcome in your own home. This isn't my home yet, Patricia said quietly. Not really. I'm an outsider who showed up pregnant, claiming to be your mate. Of course people will have doubts. Christopher cupped her face in his hands. Then we'll prove them wrong. Together. That night, Christopher insisted Patricia join him for dinner in his private dining room. Not the Great Hall, he'd said when she'd protested. Just us. I want to talk without an audience. Now Patricia sat across from him at a small table laden with more food than 2 people could possibly eat. Roasted meat. Fresh bread. Vegetables prepared 3 different ways. Fruit, cheese, wine for him, and herbal tea for her. I can't eat all this, she said, overwhelmed. Eat what you want. The rest will go to the servants. Christopher filled her plate with modest portions. The healer said, You need to keep your strength up. The baby is drawing a lot of energy from you. Patricia picked at her food, her appetite uncertain. The baby kicked, and she winced. What's wrong? Christopher was alert immediately. Nothing. Just very active tonight. She rubbed her belly. It's been like this since we got here. Like it knows something is different. May I? Christopher gestured to her stomach. Patricia nodded, and he moved his chair closer, placing his hand gently on her belly. The baby kicked hard against his palm, and Christopher's expression transformed into that look of wonder Patricia was beginning to recognize. Strong, he murmured, just like its mother. I'm not strong. I've spent 5 months running and hiding. You survived 5 months alone while pregnant, with enemies searching for you, and you protected our child the entire time. Christopher looked up at her. That's the definition of strength, Patricia. She wanted to believe him, wanted to see herself the way he seemed to see her. But a lifetime of being told she was nothing, worth nothing, was hard to overcome. Tell me about the council, she said, changing the subject. How much power do they really have? Christopher sighed, sitting back. They're advisors, technically. 12 members, representing different territories and factions within the kingdom. Traditionally, the Alpha King listens to their council, but makes his own decisions. But some of them have gotten used to having influence, Susan especially. She's been on the council for 20 years, and she's used to being heard. He paused. She also had a daughter she'd hoped I would choose as my mate. Patricia's stomach dropped. What happened to her? Nothing. She married an alpha from the Western Territories and seems quite happy. Christopher reached across the table for Patricia's hand. But Susan sees you as the reason her family didn't gain more power. She'll make trouble. What kind of trouble? Questions about legitimacy. Demands for proof that you're really my mate. Suggestions that the child might not be mine. His jaw clenched. All of it easily disproven, but she'll make the process as difficult as possible. Can she force us apart? No. Christopher's voice was absolute. The bond is undeniable, and once the baby is born, there will be no question about its bloodline, but she can make your life here harder than it needs to be. Patricia withdrew her hand, wrapping her arms around herself. Maybe it would be better if I left. Went somewhere quiet to have the baby, and then, no. Christopher stood, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. Patricia, look at me. She did, reluctantly. I know this is overwhelming. I know you're scared. But running again isn't the answer. You and our child belong here, with me, and I will handle Susan and the council, and anyone else who threatens that. How? By being the Alpha King, by making it clear that you're under my protection, and that harming you means facing me. His eyes burned with intensity, and by showing them what I already know, that you're exactly the Luna this kingdom needs. I don't know how to be what you need. You already are. Christopher stood, pulling her up with him. You're kind, you're resilient, you protect the vulnerable. The rest, the politics, the protocols that can be taught, but those core qualities, you're born with them or you're not. And you have them. Patricia wanted to believe him. But as she looked into his golden eyes, feeling the baby kick between them and the bond pulse with certainty, a small voice in her head whispered that maybe, just maybe, he was right. I'll try, she said finally. For the baby. For us. Christopher's smile was like sunrise. That's all I ask. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. And for the first time since arriving at the castle, Patricia felt something other than fear. She felt possibility. Chapter 7. The Court's Challenge. 2 weeks later, Patricia stood in front of the full-length mirror in her chambers, barely recognizing herself. The servants had dressed her in a gown of deep blue silk that accommodated her swollen belly, with silver embroidery that caught the light. Her hair had been arranged in an elaborate style she'd never be able to replicate herself, and someone had even applied subtle cosmetics to her face. She looked like a Luna. She felt like an imposter. You look beautiful, Anne said from behind her, adjusting the drape of the gown. The council won't be able to find fault with your appearance, at least. Will they find fault with everything else? Patricia asked, her hands instinctively moving to her belly. At nearly 7 months pregnant now, she couldn't hide the pregnancy even if she wanted to. The baby had grown significantly in the 2 weeks since she'd arrived, and the healers said it was larger and stronger than normal for this stage. Some will try, Anne said honestly. But you have the Alpha King's support. That counts for more than you realize. A knock at the door made Patricia's heart jump. Christopher entered, dressed in formal attire black and silver that marked him unmistakably as the Alpha King. But when he saw her, something softened in his expression. "You're stunning," he said. "I'm terrified." "I know." He crossed to her and took both her hands. "But I'll be right there. And Peter will be there. And half the council already supports you, which means half doesn't." Christopher's jaw tightened. "Let me handle them. You just need to be yourself. That's what I'm afraid of. Myself isn't good enough for—" "Stop." Christopher cupped her face. "You are more than good enough. You're everything." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Ready?" Patricia took a deep breath and nodded. Even though every instinct screamed at her to run, the council chamber was massive and intimidating. A long table dominated the center of the room, with 12 high-backed chairs arranged along its length. Christopher's throne-like chair sat at the head, and a smaller chair had been placed beside it for her. All 12 council members were already seated when Patricia and Christopher entered. Their eyes tracked her movement as she walked, and Patricia felt the weight of their scrutiny like a physical thing. Susan sat in the chair closest to Christopher's right, her expression coldly neutral. Others looked curious, assessing. A few seemed openly hostile. Christopher guided Patricia to her chair with a hand on her lower back, a gesture of support that everyone noticed. Once she was seated, he took his own place. "Members of the council," Christopher began, his voice carrying the absolute authority of his position. "Thank you for gathering. I've called this meeting to formally present Patricia Knox, my mate and the mother of my heir." "Allegedly," Susan said quietly, but loud enough to be heard. Christopher's eyes flashed gold. "Excuse me?" "I said allegedly. Your Majesty, we have only your word that she's your mate. And as for the child," Susan's gaze dropped pointedly to Patricia's belly. "Pregnancy is easy enough to claim. Proving paternity is another matter. Are you questioning my word?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I'm questioning the wisdom of accepting a complete stranger as Luna without proper verification." Susan leaned forward. She appeared from nowhere, conveniently pregnant, with no family, no history. Nothing to verify her identity or intentions. "I can verify her identity," a new voice said. Everyone turned. Kelly Woods stood in the doorway, having been invited to attend as a witness. "I examined Patricia when she was approximately 6 weeks pregnant, long before the Alpha King found her," Kelly continued, entering the room. "I can confirm the pregnancy timeline matches exactly with the Harvest Moon Festival. I can also confirm her healer's bloodline, something that cannot be faked or manufactured. A healer could be bribed," another council member said, a thin man with calculating eyes. "I could not," Kelly said firmly, "and I would stake my reputation on my findings. This child carries alpha blood of extraordinary power. Only one alpha in this kingdom has that kind of strength. The first healer bloodline is also unmistakable," Luella added, stepping forward from where she'd been standing along the wall. "I've tested Patricia's blood myself. She is exactly what she appears to be." Susan's expression tightened, but she wasn't done. "Even if we accept all of that, there's still the question of her fitness to rule. She has no education, no training, no understanding of our ways. She's common-born, illiterate." "I can read," Patricia said quietly. All eyes turned to her. She'd been silent until now, letting Christopher and the healers defend her. But Susan's words hit too close to old wounds. "Not well," Susan continued. "Not enough to manage council correspondence or understand treaties. Or, then I'll learn." Patricia forced herself to meet Susan's gaze. "You're right. I don't have the education a Luna should have. But I'm willing to work for it. To study, to train, to do whatever is necessary to be worthy of this position." "Worthy?" Susan laughed, a cold sound. "My dear girl, some things cannot be taught. Breeding, refinement, the instincts required to navigate court politics, These things are inborn. Or they're not. Like compassion? Patricia countered. Like the ability to see people as more than their bloodlines or their usefulness? She placed her hand on her belly. I may not know politics, but I know how to survive. I know how to protect what matters. And I know that this child deserves a mother who will fight for them, not one who sees them as a tool for power. The baby kicked hard, as if agreeing. Several council members noticed, their expressions shifting. She has spirit. An older man at the far end of the table said, sounding almost impressed. I'll give her that. Spirit doesn't qualify someone to be Luna, Susan snapped. No, but the mate bond does, Christopher said. His voice had gone quiet, dangerous. And I'm tired of this interrogation. Patricia is my mate. She carries my child. Those are facts, not up for debate. The only question is whether this council chooses to accept reality or continue fighting a losing battle. We have a right to ensure. You have a responsibility to support your alpha king and his chosen mate, Christopher interrupted. Everything else is politics and posturing. Susan stood, her chair scraping loudly. If you expect us to simply accept this unprecedented situation without question, you're asking too much. I'm not asking. Christopher rose as well, and the power radiating from him made even Susan step back. I'm telling you, Patricia is Luna. Her child is my heir. Anyone who cannot accept that is welcome to resign from this council. The silence that followed was tense. Patricia held her breath, waiting. Finally, Susan sat back down. Very well, Your Majesty. But there is still a matter of tradition to consider. Christopher's eyes narrowed. What tradition? The trial of acceptance. Susan's smile was sharp. Any Luna who ascends from outside the noble families must prove herself before the court. It's ancient law, written into the kingdom's founding documents. Patricia saw Christopher's hands clench. That law hasn't been invoked in over a century, but it still stands. Susan looked at Patricia. Unless you're unwilling to prove yourself, what does the trial involve? Patricia asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Tests of character, wisdom, and strength. Nothing too arduous, Susan said, but something in her tone suggested otherwise. Given your condition, we would of course make accommodations. How long do I have to prepare? Susan's smile widened. The trial must be completed before the child's birth. As you're already 7 months along, I'd suggest we schedule it for 2 weeks from today. That should give you adequate time. 2 weeks. Patricia felt panic claw at her throat. She knew nothing about court traditions, about the tests they might set for her. 2 weeks wasn't enough time to learn everything she needed to know. But she also knew that refusing would give Susan exactly what she wanted, grounds to claim Patricia was unfit. I accept, Patricia said. Christopher turned to her sharply. Patricia, we can contest this. The law is archaic. And your condition, I'll do it. Patricia met his gaze. If this is what it takes to be accepted, then I'll do it. You shouldn't have to prove anything, Christopher said quietly. You're already enough. But they don't believe that. Patricia looked around the table. And until I prove myself, there will always be questions. Always doubt. I don't want that for our child. I don't want them growing up with people whispering that their mother wasn't worthy. Something shifted in several council members' expressions. Respect. Perhaps. Or at least the acknowledgement that she understood what was at stake. 2 weeks, Susan said, standing. The trial will consist of 3 tests. Wisdom, compassion, and strength. You'll be informed of the specific details 3 days before. That's not enough time to prepare properly, Peter objected from his position along the wall. Then she should have thought of that before claiming a position she's unqualified for. Susan headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Patricia? The tests will be public. The entire court will witness them. I suggest you prepare not just your skills but your nerves as well. After she left, followed by several other council members, Christopher turned to Patricia. You don't have to do this. I can find a way around it. No. Patricia placed her hand over his. She's right about one thing I need to prove myself. Not to you, but to them. To the kingdom. And to myself. You're 7 months pregnant. Whatever tests she designs will be intentionally difficult. Then I'll work twice as hard. Patricia stood, her hand on her belly where the baby kicked restlessly. I've survived worse than a trial, Christopher. I can survive this too. That night, Patricia couldn't sleep. She stood at the window of her chambers, looking out at the moonlit gardens below. Behind her, she heard the door open and close quietly. You should be resting, Christopher said, crossing to stand beside her. I can't. My mind won't stop. Patricia pressed her hand to the cool glass. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? You won't fail. And you are good enough. Christopher turned her to face him. But Patricia, you need to know something. Susan is going to make this trial as difficult as possible. She wants you to fail. I know. And even if you pass, she'll find other ways to undermine you. Other challenges, other tests. I know that too. Patricia looked up at him. But what choice do I have? Run again? Hide? Spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? She shook her head. I'm tired of running, Christopher. I want to stand and fight, even if I'm terrified. Christopher pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly. Then we'll fight together. And whatever Susan throws at you, we'll face it. Patricia leaned into him, drawing strength from his certainty even as fear gnawed at her. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to prepare for tests designed to break her, to prove she was unworthy. 2 weeks to show the council and herself that she was more than the frightened orphan who'd run from the festival. 2 weeks to become a Luna. The baby kicked hard, and Patricia placed Christopher's hand over the spot. He smiled slightly. Our child has your fighting spirit, he murmured. Let's hope that's enough. But as Patricia looked out at the castle that was supposed to be her home, at the kingdom she was supposed to help rule, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real test wasn't in 2 weeks. It was happening right now. Every day, every moment, she chose to stay instead of run. And she was terrified she might fail. Chapter 8. The Trial and Early Labor. 2 weeks later, Patricia stood in the great hall, surrounded by what felt like the entire court. Hundreds of nobles, guards, and servants had gathered to witness the trial of acceptance, all of them watching her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases, outright hostility. She was 8 months pregnant now. Her belly so large she struggled to see her own feet. The baby had grown at an alarming rate over the past 2 weeks, and Luella had warned that labor could come early given the child's power and size. But Patricia had insisted on going through with the trial. Susan had made it clear that any delay would be seen as cowardice, and Patricia refused to give her that satisfaction. Christopher stood to the side with Peter, his expression tense. He'd argued against this until the last moment, but Patricia had been firm. This was something she needed to do. Susan stepped forward, her voice carrying through the hall. Patricia Knox, you stand before this court to prove your worthiness to be Luna. You will face 3 trials: wisdom, compassion, and strength. Do you accept these terms? I do, Patricia said, keeping her voice steady. Then let us begin with the trial of wisdom. Susan gestured to a table that had been set up in the center of the hall. On it lay several scrolls and documents. Before you are treaties, land disputes, and requests for judgment. You have 1 hour to review them and provide your counsel on how the Alpha King should proceed. Patricia moved to the table, her back already aching from standing. She picked up the first scroll and began to read. The documents were complex, written in formal language that was difficult to parse. The first was a border dispute between 2 noble families, each claiming the same stretch of land. The second was a trade agreement with a neighboring kingdom that seemed heavily weighted in the other kingdom's favor. The third was a request from a village for aid after a failed harvest. Patricia read carefully, aware of hundreds of eyes on her. Her reading had improved over the past 2 weeks. Christopher had hired tutors who worked with her every day, but she was still slow, still stumbling over complex words. The baby kicked hard, making her wince. She pressed her hand to her belly and took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. Think. What would be fair? What would help the most people? When the hour was up, Susan called for her answers. Patricia stood, her voice carrying despite her nervousness. For the border dispute, I would suggest sending a neutral surveyor to determine the original boundary markers. The land should go to whoever has legal right, not whoever has more influence. Several nobles murmured. Susan's expression remained neutral. And the trade agreement? It's unfair. We're giving too much for too little in return. Patricia pointed to specific clauses. These terms would hurt our merchants and benefit theirs. I would renegotiate or refuse to sign. Bold, Susan said. That could risk our relationship with that kingdom. Better to risk a relationship than guarantee our people suffer, Patricia replied. More murmurs, these ones sounding almost approving. And the village request? Grant it. Send supplies and people to help replant for next season. A kingdom is only as strong as its people, and leaving a village to starve weakens us all. Susan studied her for a long moment. Interesting answers. Some practical, some idealistic. She turned to the council members who sat in judgment. Your assessment? The council members conferred quietly. Finally, the older man who'd spoken in Patricia's favor before stood. Her answers show compassion balanced with practicality. She may lack formal education, but her instincts are sound. I vote to pass her on the trial of wisdom. 6 others nodded in agreement. Susan's jaw tightened, but she couldn't argue with a majority. Very well. You passed the first trial. Susan's smile was sharp. Now for the trial of compassion. A door at the side of the hall opened, and 3 people were led in, a young woman with a baby, an elderly man, and a teenage boy. All of them looked poor, worn, desperate. These 3 have come before the court seeking justice, Susan announced. The woman's husband was killed in a hunting accident on noble lands, and she seeks compensation to feed her child. The old man's home was burned down, and he needs shelter. The boy was caught stealing food from a merchant. You must decide their fates. Patricia's heart clenched. This wasn't about wisdom, it was about weighing mercy against law, compassion against order. She approached the young woman first. What's your name? Tamra, my lady, the woman whispered, clutching her baby. And your husband, what happened? He was hunting for food, my lady. We were starving. He crossed onto Lord Eduardo's lands without permission, and tears streamed down her face. The Lord's men said it was an accident, that their arrow went astray. But my Thomas is dead, and I have nothing. Patricia felt rage kindle in her chest. She turned to Susan. Is Lord Eduardo here? A portly man in fine clothes stood from among the nobles. I am here, and I'll remind the court that the woman's husband was trespassing. My men were within their rights to defend my property. By killing a starving man? Patricia's voice shook. A man desperate enough to risk his life for food? The law is clear. The law should serve justice, not cruelty. Patricia turned to Christopher. She had no actual authority to make rulings, but this was a test of what she would counsel. If I were Luna, I would order Lord Eduardo to provide compensation enough to support Tamra and her child for 2 years. And I would also order an investigation into why his lands are so closely guarded that a desperate man ends up dead for trying to feed his family. Eduardo's face reddened. You can't. This is her trial, Christopher said quietly. Let her speak. Patricia moved to the elderly man. And you, sir. Your name? And Jeffrey, my lady. I'm a woodcarver. My home burned 3 weeks ago. I've been sleeping in the forest since. Through winter? Patricia felt tears sting her eyes. The nights had been cold lately, frost covering the ground each morning. Why hasn't anyone helped you? I have no family, my lady. And I'm too old to work much anymore. No one wants to take in a useless mouth to feed. You're not useless. Patricia's voice was fierce. And a kingdom that abandons its elders is no kingdom at all. She looked at Anne, who stood among the servants. Do we have empty rooms in the servants' quarters? Anne blinked in surprise. Yes, my lady. Several. Then Jeffrey will have one. And he'll work as much or as little as he's able, teaching his woodcarving skills to younger people who want to learn. Jeffrey's eyes filled with tears. My lady, thank you. Patricia finally approached the boy. He couldn't be more than 15, thin and hollow-cheeked. What's your name? Devon, he mumbled, not meeting her eyes. And you stole food? Yes. His voice was barely audible. I was hungry. Where are your parents? Dead. 2 years now. Devon finally looked up, defiance mixing with desperation in his eyes. I know it was wrong, but I haven't eaten in 3 days, and I thought better to steal than starve. Patricia felt something crack in her chest. She saw herself in this boy alone, desperate, doing whatever it took to survive. The merchant he stole from demands punishment, Susan said. By law, theft is punishable by imprisonment or labor. Then he'll work, Patricia said. But not as punishment, as opportunity. She looked at Carlton, the innkeeper who'd helped her in Riverside and had come to the castle at her invitation. Carlton, you mentioned needing help at your inn. Would you take Devon as an apprentice? Teach him the trade, give him honest work? Carlton smiled. Aye, my lady. I'd be happy to. Patricia turned back to Devon. You'll work hard, learn a trade, and earn your keep honestly. But you'll also have food, shelter, and a future. Does that seem fair? Devon nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes, my lady. Thank you. Susan's expression was unreadable as she turned to the council. Your assessment of the trial of compassion. This time, 8 council members voted to pass her. Even Susan couldn't argue with the mercy and practical wisdom Patricia had shown. 2 trials passed, Susan announced. But now comes the most important, the trial of strength. Patricia's heart sank as guards brought forward a series of weapons, swords, staffs, daggers. Wait, Christopher said, stepping forward. She's 8 months pregnant. Physical combat is out of the question. The trial isn't about combat, Susan said smoothly. It's about strength of will, endurance, the ability to withstand pressure. She gestured, and more guards entered, carrying something that made Patricia's blood run cold. A chair, with restraints built into the arms and legs. The trial of strength is simple, Susan continued. You will sit in that chair while we question you about your past, your intentions, your fitness to rule. You must endure for 3 hours without breaking, without asking for mercy, without revealing any weakness that would make you unfit. That's torture, Peter objected. That's tradition, Susan countered. Many Lunas have endured worse. Of course, if Patricia feels she cannot. She let the implication hang. Patricia looked at the chair, at Christopher's furious expression, at the hundreds of faces watching her. She could refuse. Christopher would support her, but Susan would use it against her forever. Proof that she was too weak, too soft, unworthy. I'll do it, Patricia said. Patricia, no. Christopher started, but she cut him off. I'll do it. She walked to the chair and sat, her back screaming in protest, her belly making it difficult to breathe. The guards fastened the restraints not tight enough to hurt, but secure enough that she couldn't leave, and then Susan began to question her. Tell us about your parents. I don't know them. I was abandoned. Why? I don't know. Perhaps they saw something weak in you. Something unworthy. Patricia clenched her jaw, refusing to respond to the bait. The questions went on. About why she'd run from Christopher. About whether she was truly his mate or just an opportunist. About whether the child was really his. Each question designed to cut, to wound, to make her break down. An hour passed. Then 2. Patricia's back was in agony, the baby kicking frantically against her ribs. She could feel sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool hall. Why should we believe you love him? Susan asked. You ran. You hid. That's not the behavior of a mate. I was afraid, Patricia said, through gritted teeth. I thought he wanted the child, not me. Perhaps you were right. Perhaps that's all you are, a vessel for his heir. Something inside Patricia snapped. If that's all I am, then why are you so threatened by me? Susan's eyes narrowed. I'm not. Yes, you are. Patricia's voice grew stronger despite the pain. You're terrified that a nobody like me could be good enough. That bloodline doesn't matter as much as you've always believed. That I could be a better Luna than your daughter ever would have been. Gasps rippled through the hall. Susan's face went white with rage. How dare you? But Patricia wasn't done. I may not have your breeding or education, but I have something you don't. I care about the people of this kingdom. All of them. Not just the nobles who can increase my power. She looked around the hall. I've been where Tamra is, where Jeffrey is, where Devon is. I know what it's like to have nothing, to be nothing. And if I'm Luna, I'll make sure no one in this kingdom has to feel that way again." The hall erupted in murmurs, some approving, some shocked. And then Patricia felt it. A sharp, stabbing pain in her belly that had nothing to do with the baby's kicks. She gasped, her hands instinctively going to her stomach. "Patricia?" Christopher was moving before anyone else could react. Another wave of pain, stronger this time. And then wetness between her legs. "No," Patricia whispered. "Not yet. It's too early." But her body had other ideas. The stress, the trial, the hours of sitting in that chair. It was too much. "She's in labor," Luella shouted, rushing forward. "Someone get her out of that chair. Now." Guards fumbled with the restraints. Christopher reached her first, gathering her into his arms as the restraints came free. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you." Another contraction hit, and Patricia cried out. "Clear the hall," Christopher roared. "Everyone out." But as servants and nobles scrambled to obey, Susan's voice cut through the chaos. "The trial isn't complete. If she leaves now, she fails." Christopher turned on her, his eyes blazing gold. "My mate is in labor. The trial is over. The law states, damn the law." Christopher's roar made the walls shake. "If you value your position on this council, you will get out of my way. Now." Susan stepped back, and Christopher carried Patricia toward the door. But Patricia grabbed his arm. "Wait, Patricia, you need the healers." "1 minute." She looked back at Susan, at the council, at the assembled court. Despite the pain, despite the fear, she forced her voice to be steady. "I endured your trial. I answered every question. The labor started because my baby decided it was time, not because I'm weak. So you can accept me or not. But I'm done proving myself to people who will never be satisfied." Another contraction hit, and this time Patricia couldn't hold back her cry of pain. Christopher carried her from the hall without another word. Behind them, the council members looked at each other. Finally, the older man stood. "I vote to accept her," he said. "She's proven more than enough." One by one, 8 other council members stood in agreement. Susan remained seated, her face a mask of fury. But she'd lost, and everyone knew it. Chapter 9, The Birth and the Attack. Christopher carried Patricia through the castle corridors at a speed that had guards scrambling out of the way. Luella and Deanna ran ahead, shouting orders to prepare the birthing chamber. "It hurts," Patricia gasped between contractions. "Christopher, it hurts so much." I know. His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Just hold on. We're almost there." They reached the birthing chamber, a room that had been prepared weeks ago, just in case. Soft fabrics draped the walls, herbs burned in braziers to purify the air, and a large bed dominated the center. Everything a laboring mother might need had been assembled. Christopher laid Patricia on the bed as gently as possible. Luella was already there, her hands glowing as she examined Patricia. "How far apart are the contractions?" the healer asked. "Close," Patricia managed. "Maybe 2 minutes." Luella's expression grew grave. "The baby is coming fast. Faster than it should. The stress from the trial triggered early labor, and the child's power is accelerating everything." "Is she in danger?" Christopher demanded. "Is the baby?" "I don't know yet. This kind of birth with a child this powerful, I've never seen it before." Luella looked at Deanna. "Get Kelly. Get every healer in the castle. Now." As Deanna ran from the room, another contraction hit. Patricia screamed, her back arching off the bed. The pain was unlike anything she'd imagined, not just physical but something deeper. The baby's power was surging with each contraction, and Patricia felt like she was being torn apart from the inside. "I can't," she sobbed. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can." Christopher was beside her instantly, taking her hand. "You're the strongest person I know. You can do this." "Don't leave," Patricia begged, gripping his hand so hard her knuckles went white. "Please don't leave me. Never." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Kelly burst into the room, followed by 2 more healers Patricia didn't recognize. They surrounded the bed, their hands glowing as they assessed the situation. The baby's power is overwhelming her body's natural process, Kelly said. We need to help channel it, or both of them could be in danger. What do we do? Luella asked. We need someone with a strong bond to the child, someone who can help guide the power. Kelly looked at Christopher. Your Majesty, I need you to place your hands on her belly. Your connection to the child might help stabilize the energy. Christopher didn't hesitate. His large hands spread across Patricia's swollen stomach, and immediately Patricia felt a difference. The chaotic, overwhelming power inside her began to not calm, exactly, but organize. Flow in a direction instead of exploding in all directions. It's working, Luella said. Keep your hands there. Another contraction, stronger than before. Patricia screamed again, and this time light burst from her belly, golden and white, so bright it made everyone shield their eyes. The baby's manifesting, Kelly said, her voice tense. It's trying to protect its mother, but it's making the labor harder. We need to. A tremendous crash from somewhere in the castle made everyone freeze. Then shouting. The clash of weapons. Screams. Peter burst into the room, his face pale. Your Majesty. We're under attack. Christopher's head snapped up. What? Armed forces. They breached the east wall. Dominique's colors. Peter's expression was grim. She's brought an army. How many? At least 200. Maybe more. Peter glanced at Patricia. She's timing this deliberately. She knows Patricia is vulnerable right now. Christopher looked between Patricia and the door, torn. Patricia could see the war raging in his eyes, the need to protect his kingdom versus the need to stay with her. Go, Patricia gasped. I'm not leaving you. You have to. Another contraction hit, and Patricia wrote it out before continuing. The kingdom needs you. I'll be fine. The healers can't protect you from an army, Christopher said. Dominique isn't just attacking the castle. She's coming for you and the baby. I know her tactics. As if to confirm his words, another crash sounded, this one closer. They're heading for the royal wing, Peter said urgently. Your Majesty, we need to move Patricia. This chamber isn't defensible. I can't be moved, Patricia panted. The baby's coming now. If we try to move me, we could lose. She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice that fear. Christopher's jaw clenched. He turned to Peter. How many guards can you spare? 20 of our best. I'll position them outside this room. Do it. And Peter? Christopher's eyes flashed gold. Hold that line. No matter what. Yes, Your Majesty. Peter ran from the room, already shouting orders. Your Majesty, you need to go, Luella urged. If Dominique reaches the throne room before you do, she could claim. I know what she could claim. Christopher looked at Patricia, and she saw the agony in his expression. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I have to. I know. Patricia squeezed his hand. Go, protect our kingdom. I'll protect our baby. He leaned down and kissed her fiercely. I love you. Do you hear me? I love you. And I'm coming back. I love you too, Patricia whispered. The words felt right, felt true, even in the midst of pain and fear. Christopher ran from the room. Patricia heard him roaring orders, heard the clash of steel as fighting erupted somewhere in the castle. And then another contraction hit, and all she could focus on was the overwhelming need to push. That's it, Luella encouraged. The baby's crowning. Just a little more. Patricia pushed with everything she had. The pain was beyond description, beyond endurance. But underneath it, she felt something else, the baby's power, surging with her efforts, helping, in its own way. One more push, Kelly urged. Come on, Patricia, your baby wants to meet you. Patricia gathered every ounce of strength she had left and pushed. The baby slipped free in a rush of fluid and relief. For one terrible moment, there was silence. Then a cry strong and clear and undeniably powerful. The sound made the very air vibrate. It's a girl, Luella announced, placing the baby on Patricia's chest. A healthy, beautiful girl. Patricia looked down at her daughter through tears. The baby was perfect, tiny fists waving, face scrunched in indignation at being thrust into the world, dark hair plastered to her head, and when her eyes opened briefly, Patricia saw gold, her father's eyes. "Hello," Patricia whispered, touching her daughter's cheek with a trembling finger. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm your mama." The baby's cry quieted at her touch, her tiny hand wrapping around Patricia's finger with surprising strength. "She's magnificent," Kelly breathed. "I can feel her power from here. She's going to be extraordinary." But the moment of peace was shattered by the sound of fighting directly outside the door. "Hold the line," Peter's voice roared. "Don't let them through." Steel clashed against steel. Men shouted and screamed. The battle was right outside. "We need to protect them," Luella said urgently. "If Dominique's forces breach this room, they won't," Dina said, moving to the door with surprising determination. "Not while we're here." The three healers positioned themselves between the bed and the door, their hands already glowing with defensive magic. Patricia clutched her daughter to her chest, her body still shaking from labor, her mind racing with fear. She could hear the battle raging, could hear Peter's voice growing hoarse with exertion, could hear the guards falling one by one. They were losing. Patricia looked down at her daughter, this tiny, perfect, powerful life she'd just brought into the world. The life she'd spent 8 months protecting, hiding, running to keep safe, and something inside her shifted. She was done running, done hiding, done letting others fight her battles. This was her child, her daughter, and no one, not Dominique, not the council, not anyone was going to take her. Patricia closed her eyes and reached for the power inside her, the first healer blood that Luella had identified. The ancient gift she'd never learned to control. But she didn't need control. She just needed to protect. The power answered her call like it had been waiting. It flooded through her body, mixing with the fierce protectiveness of a new mother, with the desperation of someone fighting for everything that mattered. When Patricia opened her eyes, they were glowing white gold. "Get behind me," she said to the healers. "Patricia, you just gave birth," Luella protested. "You're in no condition to." The door exploded inward. Peter stumbled through, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, 3 guards behind him. Beyond them, Patricia could see bodies guards who'd given their lives defending this room, and walking through the carnage, calm and collected, was Dominique. "Well," the woman said, stepping over a fallen guard without a glance. "That was more difficult than I expected. Your mate trains his men well, Patricia." Her eyes found the baby in Patricia's arms. "But it doesn't matter now. I'm here for what I came for." "You can't have her," Patricia said. "I'm not asking permission." Dominique raised her hand, power crackling between her fingers. "That child is too powerful to leave in the hands of someone untrained. Someone weak. I'll take her, raise her properly, and use her power to—" "No." The word came out with such force that it sent a shockwave through the room. Dominique stumbled backward, her eyes widening. "You will not touch my daughter," Patricia said, and power rolled off her in waves. The ancient symbols on the cloth she'd been wrapped in as a baby, the first healer runes, suddenly made sense. They weren't just protection. They were a seal, holding back power too great for a child to control, a seal that had just broken. Light exploded from Patricia, pure white tinged with gold, the same light that had erupted when she'd protected herself from Dominique months ago. But this time, it was controlled, directed, devastating. Dominique tried to counter with her own magic, but it was like throwing water at a wildfire. Patricia's power swept through the room, and Dominique screamed as it slammed into her, driving her backward through the door and down the hall. Peter stared at Patricia in shock. "What?" "Protect my daughter," Patricia said, placing the baby in his arms. "I'm ending this." "Patricia, you can't." But Patricia was already moving. Her body should have been weak, should have been barely able to stand after labor, but the power flowing through her gave her strength. She walked through the door, past the fallen guards, following the path Dominique had been thrown. The woman was trying to stand, her face twisted with fury and fear. "You're a first healer," Dominique breathed. A true one. I thought they were all dead. Not all of us. Patricia's hands began to glow. And we protect what we love. Dominique gathered her power for another attack, but Patricia was faster. She reached out with her gift not to harm, but to heal. To fix what was broken in Dominique. The twisted ambition. The corrupted desire for power. The emptiness that drove her to hurt others. Dominique screamed as the healing light touched her. Because true healing doesn't just mend wounds. It burns away rot. When the light faded, Dominique collapsed to her knees, gasping. The darkness that had driven her was gone, burned out. What remained was a broken woman. Suddenly aware of everything she'd done, everyone she'd hurt. What did you do to me? Dominique whispered. I healed you. Patricia said quietly. Now you have to live with who you really are. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Christopher appeared, covered in blood, none of it his sword drawn. He took in the scene. Patricia standing, Dominique on her knees. The power still glowing around Patricia's hands. It's over, Patricia said. She won't be a threat anymore. Christopher crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands cupping her face. You should be in bed. You just gave birth. I'm fine. But our daughter. Patricia swayed suddenly, the adrenaline fading. Christopher, I need to see. He caught her as her legs gave out. I've got you, always. He carried her back to the birthing chamber, where Peter still held the baby, looking completely overwhelmed. The infant was quiet now, seeming to sense that the danger had passed. Christopher laid Patricia on the bed, then took their daughter from Peter with hands that trembled slightly. Hello, little one, he murmured. I'm sorry I wasn't here when you were born. But I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making up for it. The baby's eyes opened golden and alert and wise beyond her minutes of life. She looked at her father, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, love. Christopher brought her to Patricia, placing her back in her mother's arms. She's perfect, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You're both perfect. Patricia looked down at her daughter, at this tiny miracle who'd already survived so much. We need to name her. What do you want to call her? Patricia thought about the trial she'd endured, the battle she'd just fought, the power that had manifested to protect her child. She thought about being strong when she'd felt weak, being brave when she'd been terrified. Hope, she said softly. Her name is Hope. Christopher's eyes glistened. Hope. It's perfect. He leaned down and kissed Patricia gently, then placed a soft kiss on Hope's forehead. Welcome to the world, Hope, he whispered. Your mother and I have been waiting for you. And as Patricia held her daughter, with Christopher's arms around them both, she finally understood what she'd been running from all those months. Not a cage, not control, not loss of self, but this overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful thing called family, and she'd never run from it again. Chapter 10. The Claiming a New Beginning. 3 days later, Patricia sat in a chair by the window, Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby had proven remarkably calm since birth, crying only when hungry or uncomfortable, and already showing signs of the extraordinary power she carried. The castle had been in chaos since the attack. Dominique's forces had surrendered immediately when their leader fell. Most had been mercenaries, fighting for coin rather than loyalty, and they'd scattered once the battle turned. Dominique herself had been taken into custody, broken, stripped of her power, a shell of the woman who'd terrorized Patricia for months. Christopher had wanted to execute her. Patricia had asked for mercy instead. She can't hurt anyone now, Patricia had said, and killing her won't undo what she did. Let her live with the consequences of her choices. It had been one of her first decisions as Luna, and Christopher had honored it. Now, as Patricia watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, she heard the door open quietly behind her. You should be resting, Christopher said, crossing to her. He was dressed formally, silver and black, that marked him as the Alpha King. The healers said at least a week of bed rest. I've been in bed for 3 days. Any longer and I'll go mad. Patricia looked up at him. Besides, Hope needs to see the world she was born into. Christopher smiled, touching their daughter's cheek with one finger. Hope stirred but didn't wake, her tiny hand curling around his finger in sleep. "The council is assembled," he said quietly. "They're waiting." Patricia's stomach tightened. "Already? They've been patient." "Well, most of them." Christopher's expression darkened. "Susan has been particularly vocal about wanting a formal acknowledgement." "Of course she has." Patricia looked down at Hope. "Is it too soon? She's only 3 days old." "It's not too soon." Christopher knelt beside the chair. "But if you need more time, I can delay it. Tell them you're still recovering." Patricia considered. She was still weak from the birth, still learning how to be a mother, still processing everything that had happened. But she also knew that delay would only give Susan and others more ammunition. And after what she'd done during the attack, manifesting power she hadn't known she possessed, defending her child against an army the court had been buzzing with whispers, some awed, some fearful, all speculating about what it meant. It was time to face them, time to claim her place, not as someone thrust into power by circumstance, but as someone who'd earned it through trial and blood. "I'm ready," Patricia said. "Let's do this." The great hall was packed. Every noble, every council member, every person of importance in the kingdom had gathered for the formal ceremony. Patricia walked between rows of watching faces, Christopher at her side, Hope cradled in her arms. She wore a gown of silver and white that Anne had commissioned, formal but accommodating for a woman who'd given birth days ago. Her hair had been arranged simply, and she wore no jewelry except a silver circlet Christopher had given her that morning. "This was my mother's," he'd said as he placed it on her head. "And now it's yours." At the front of the hall, the council sat in their places. Susan's expression was carefully neutral, but Patricia could see the calculation in her eyes. 8 council members who'd voted for Patricia looked approving. The remaining 3 looked uncertain. An elder stepped forward, the same one who'd proclaimed Christopher's victory over Kyle months ago. He carried a staff carved with ancient symbols, and his voice carried through the hall with authority. "We are gathered to witness the formal claiming ceremony," he announced. "Christopher Choi, Alpha King of all territories, has chosen his mate and Luna. She has passed the trials set before her. She has given birth to his heir. Now, before all assembled, he will claim her formally and irrevocably." Christopher turned to Patricia, taking both her hands in his. Hope stirred between them but remained asleep. "Patricia Knox," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "When I met you at the Harvest Moon Festival, I didn't know I was meeting my mate. I only knew that something in you called to something in me. That for the first time in my life, I felt complete." Patricia's eyes burned with tears, but she kept them from falling. "You ran from me," Christopher continued, "and I searched for you. For months, I tore this kingdom apart looking for you, not knowing you were protecting the greatest gift you could give me, our daughter." He glanced down at Hope with such love it made Patricia's chest ache. "You've endured trials meant to break you. You've faced enemies meant to destroy you. You've proven your strength, your wisdom, your compassion. You've proven you're exactly the Luna this kingdom needs." He released one of her hands and withdrew a silver knife from his belt. Patricia knew what came next. The formal claiming required blood, a permanent mark that would identify her to every wolf in the kingdom as the Alpha King's mate. "Do you accept me as your mate?" Christopher asked. "Do you accept the bond between us, the responsibility of being Luna, the life we'll build together?" Patricia looked at him, at this man who'd searched for her when she'd run, who'd defended her when others doubted, who'd stood beside her through every trial. This man who looked at their daughter like she'd hung the stars, and who looked at Patricia like she was precious beyond measure. "I accept," she said clearly. "I accept you as my mate, as my partner, as the father of my child. I accept the bond between us and everything it means." Christopher drew the blade across his palm, then offered it to Patricia. She shifted Hope carefully into one arm and took the knife, drawing it across her own palm. The cut stung, but Patricia didn't flinch. Christopher pressed his bleeding palm to hers, their fingers intertwining. The bond between them flared to life, visible now as golden light that wrapped around their joined hands. The hall gasped. Some had seen mate bonds before, but rarely this strong, this visible. "By blood and bond," the elder intoned. "By the witness of this court and the blessing of the old gods, I declare Patricia Knox to be Luna of all territories, mate to the Alpha King, mother of his heir." Let any who would challenge this speak now, or remain silent forever. Silence. Even Susan said nothing. Though her jaw was tight, the elder raised his staff. Then it is done. All hail Patricia, Luna of the realm. All hail. The crowd echoed, bowing. Patricia looked out at hundreds of faces bowing to her, the orphan who'd had nothing, who'd been nobody. The weight of it was overwhelming, but then Hope made a small sound, and Christopher's hand squeezed hers, and Patricia realized something important. She wasn't just a Luna now. She was a mother, a mate, a woman who'd found her place after a lifetime of searching, and that mattered more than any title. After the ceremony, there was a feast. Patricia sat beside Christopher at the high table, Hope sleeping in a cradle that had been placed between their chairs. Nobles approached throughout the evening to offer congratulations and gifts for the baby. Patricia accepted them all with grace, though exhaustion pulled at her. "You're tired," Christopher murmured. "We can leave." "Not yet." Patricia forced a smile. "This is important. You're more important." But he didn't push, just kept his hand on hers, a steady presence. Susan approached near the end of the evening. Patricia tensed, but the councilwoman's expression was not warm. Exactly, but less hostile than before. "Luna Patricia," Susan said formally. "I wanted to offer my congratulations on your daughter's birth." "Thank you, counselor." Susan hesitated, then continued. "I also wanted to apologize for the harshness of the trial. I allowed my personal disappointments to color my judgment. It wasn't a full apology," Patricia noticed. Susan was still proud, still certain of her own worth. But it was something. "I appreciate that," Patricia said carefully. "And I hope we can work together going forward. For the good of the kingdom." Susan's lips tightened, but she nodded. "For the good of the kingdom." She glanced at Hope. "Your daughter is remarkable. I can sense her power even now. She'll need careful guidance as she grows." "She'll have it," Christopher said, his voice carrying a warning. "From both her parents." Susan bowed and retreated. Patricia let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That went better than expected," she murmured. "She's smart enough to know when she's lost," Christopher replied. "And you've proven you're not someone to underestimate." Late that night, in their private chambers, Patricia finally allowed herself to rest. Hope lay in her cradle beside the bed, sleeping peacefully. Christopher had dismissed the servants. Wanting this time to be just the three of them, he sat on the edge of the bed, watching Patricia with an expression she was learning to recognize, wonder mixed with fierce protectiveness. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That 9 months ago, I was a king with everything except what mattered most. And now," he looked at Hope, then back at Patricia. "Now I have everything." Patricia reached for his hand. "I'm sorry I ran. I'm sorry I wasted so much time being afraid. You were protecting yourself. Protecting her." Christopher brought her hand to his lips. "I understand why you did it. I just wish you'd trusted me sooner." "I didn't trust myself," Patricia admitted. "I didn't believe I could be enough for you, for this life. Sometimes I still don't." "Patricia." Christopher moved fully onto the bed, gathering her carefully into his arms. "You're more than enough. You always have been. And I'm going to spend the rest of our lives proving it to you." He kissed her then, gentle and deep, full of promise and love. When they parted, Patricia rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I love you," she whispered. "I don't think I've said it enough. But I do. I love you." "I love you too," Christopher murmured into her hair. "Both of you. My mate. My Luna. My family." Hope made a small sound from her cradle, and Christopher reluctantly pulled away to check on her. He lifted their daughter carefully, and Patricia watched as he held her against his chest, swaying slightly. "She has your eyes," Patricia said softly. "And your determination." Christopher smiled. "She's going to be formidable. She's going to be loved," Patricia corrected. "That's what matters most." Christopher brought Hope back to the bed, and the three of them lay together, Christopher on one side, Patricia on the other. Hope between them, the baby's tiny hand wrapped around Patricia's finger. and her other hand found Christopher's. "This is what I dreamed of," Patricia whispered. "All those nights on the road, hiding and afraid. I dreamed of this. Being safe, being loved, having a family." "You have it now," Christopher said. "And I promise you I will never let anything threaten that. You and Hope are my world. Everything else is just details." 6 months later, Patricia stood in the castle gardens, watching Hope attempt to crawl. At 6 months old, their daughter was already showing signs of being advanced, alert, strong, curious about everything. And her power, while still mostly dormant, occasionally manifested in small ways. Objects moved when she reached for them. Lights flickered when she cried. The healers said it was normal for a child with her bloodline, but Patricia still found it both amazing and terrifying. "She'll be walking by 8 months, Luella had predicted, and manifesting her first shift by age 2. Hope is going to rewrite everything we know about alpha development." Hope babbled something that might have been Mama, and Patricia's heart melted. She knelt beside her daughter, helping her move forward. "That's it, sweetheart. You're so strong, just like her mother," Christopher said, approaching from the castle. Patricia looked up and smiled. He still made her heart race, even after all these months, even after everything they'd been through. "How was the council meeting?" she asked. "Long, tedious." Susan tried to argue about tax allocation for an hour. Christopher knelt beside them, and Hope immediately reached for him with a delighted squeal. "But productive. We approved funding for 3 new schools in the outer villages." Patricia's idea. One of many changes she'd implemented since becoming Luna. Schools for common children. Better support for orphanages. Laws protecting workers from exploitation by nobles. Some council members had resisted. But with Christopher's backing and the support of 8 council members who'd grown to respect her, Patricia had pushed through changes that would help people like she'd once been. "The school in Millbrook opens next month," Christopher continued, lifting Hope into the air. She giggled, her tiny fists waving. "The one where you first hid. Anne suggested we attend the opening ceremony." "I'd like that," Patricia said. "It would be good for people to see that Luna cares about all the territories, not just the capital." Christopher set Hope back down, and she immediately crawled toward a flowering bush, fascinated by the purple blooms. "You've changed this kingdom," he said quietly. "In just 6 months, you've changed it more than I did in 10 years of ruling. I'm just fixing things that were broken. You're doing more than that. You're giving people hope." He pulled her close. "Appropriate, given our daughter's name." Patricia leaned into him, watching Hope explore the garden with fearless curiosity. A year ago, she'd been alone, pregnant, terrified, running from the very man whose arms now held her. A year ago, she'd been nobody, with nothing, convinced she'd never deserve anything better. Now she was Luna. Mother, mate, woman who'd found not just a place to belong, but a purpose that mattered. "What are you thinking?" Christopher asked, feeling her smile against his chest. "That I'm glad I stopped running," Patricia said. "That I'm glad you found me. That I'm glad." She looked up at him. "That one night at a festival changed everything." "Best night of my life," Christopher said. "Well, second best. The night Hope was born takes first place. Even though I was screaming at you, especially because of that." He grinned. "You were magnificent. Terrifying and magnificent." Hope chose that moment to crawl back to them, leaves stuck in her dark hair and dirt smudged on her face. She looked up at her parents with golden eyes full of mischief and love. Patricia scooped her up, leaves and all. "You're a mess, little one." Hope just giggled and grabbed a fistful of Patricia's hair. "She's perfect," Christopher said, touching Hope's cheek. "You both are." And as Patricia stood in the garden with her daughter in her arms and her mate at her side, with the castle she'd once feared now feeling like home, she finally understood something important. She hadn't lost herself by accepting the bond, by becoming Luna, by building this life. She'd found herself. The orphan girl who'd had nothing had become the woman who had everything that mattered, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure no one in her kingdom had to feel as lost as she once had, making sure every child knew they mattered, every person knew they were valued, every soul had a chance to find their place. Because she knew what it was like to be nobody, and she knew what it was like to become somebody, And the difference between those two things was simple: love. Epilogue. 5 years later. Hope raced through the castle gardens, her dark hair flying behind her, her laughter ringing through the air. At 5 years old, she was already showing the strength and speed of her alpha heritage, though her first shift wouldn't come for a few more years. Behind her, Christopher gave chase, growling playfully. "I'm going to catch you." "No, you won't, Papa." Hope shrieked with delight, dodging around a fountain. Patricia watched from a bench, one hand resting on her very pregnant belly. Their second child, a boy, according to the healers, would arrive within the month. Hope was excited to become a big sister, though she'd informed everyone that the baby would need to learn that she was in charge. "Your Majesty?" Anne approached with a basket. "The letters you requested. Thank you." Patricia took the basket, which contained correspondence from all the villages where she'd hidden during her pregnancy with Hope. She still maintained contact with people like Vivian, Kelly, and Carlton, making sure they were well, that they had support, that they hadn't suffered for helping her. Many of them now held positions in her network of informants, not spies. Exactly, but people who kept her informed about conditions in the outer territories. People who told her when villages needed help, when nobles were abusing their power, when children were going hungry. Patricia had become known as the Luna who listened, the Luna who cared, the Luna who'd been one of them before fate lifted her up. "Mama!" Hope came running, Christopher close behind. "Mama, Papa says I can visit the new school tomorrow, the one in Riverside. If your mother approves," Christopher added, slightly out of breath. Their daughter had more energy than seemed possible. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Patricia said, pulling Hope onto her lap, or as close to her lap as her belly allowed. "You can tell the children what it's like to learn to read and write." Hope's education was something Patricia insisted on personally overseeing. Their daughter would learn to read and write, yes, but also to understand that knowledge was privilege, and privilege came with responsibility. "And I can tell them about the baby." Hope placed her small hand on Patricia's belly. "He kicked me yesterday." "Did you feel it, Mama?" "I felt it," Patricia laughed. "He's very active." "Like his sister," Christopher said, sitting beside them. His hand joined Hope's on Patricia's stomach, and the baby kicked again, as if recognizing his father's touch. Hope leaned against Patricia's shoulder, suddenly serious. "Mama, will you tell me the story again? About how you and Papa met?" It was her favorite story, how Patricia had been at a festival, how she'd met a stranger in the darkness, how they'd fallen in love without knowing who the other person was. Patricia had adapted it slightly for a 5-year-old's understanding, leaving out the parts about running and hiding in the dangerous chase that followed. Those details could wait until Hope was older. "Once upon a time," Patricia began, and Hope settled in to listen to the tale she'd heard 100 times but never tired of hearing. As Patricia told the story, with Christopher's arm around her shoulders and Hope's head on her chest and their son moving in her belly, she thought about how far she'd come from that terrified girl at the festival. She'd run because she was afraid. She'd stopped running because she was loved. And now, 5 years later, she was exactly where she was always meant to be, home. As Patricia's story comes to a close, I'm curious. Would you have run like she did? Or trusted the bond from the beginning? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story touched your heart, leave a like to help others discover it too. Until next time.